as Center of Excellence for University Science and Technology in collaboration with Research Center for Marine and Fisheries, and also in collaboration with Tsunami and Static Archive Institution. For the blessing of our event today, let's begin with the recital of Al-Fatihah. Amin, amin, ya Rabbal Alamin. For a brief moment, I would like to invite all participants to sing the national anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya. Please, all the guests, stand up. To all the guests, please remain seated again. Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we will be witnessing the welcoming remarks from the head of TDMRC of Universitas Syah Kuala to Professor Dr. Syamsidik. The stage is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina. First of all, Honorable Professor Taufik Fadi Abidin, our head of Research Center and Community Services for Education, and our speaker, Professor Iwasak from URI, University of Rhode Island of United States, Professor Steve Deary from Laval University in Canada, then Bapak Farhan Muhammad Uzair from Marine Static Archive Agency or BAST, Bapak Dr. Nur Fadli from Faculty of Marine Science, and then Ibu Rina Suryani Oktari, our speakers from TDMRC, guests from Sabang government, and then also from BMKG. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. I would like first to thank to all the participants, speakers, guests event. Probably it's quite short notice to all of you to give this kind of information that we have a seminar. On the same day, on this day, actually we are celebrating the National Awakening. kind of national commemoration organized by the central government of research, Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology of India. For today, we choose the topic on local knowledge and marine protected areas. Kind of hot issue in this area in regards to disaster risk reduction. I believe that most of us in this room that are aware that the problem of climate change induced disasters a global level right now. We are facing a serious challenges in mitigating natural hazard combined with impacts of the climate. Recently, we observed some adverse impacts. Asia. For example, you probably heard that occur every 6 months probably. There's coastal flooding impacted communities in the northern part of Jakarta. And another one that been recently nationally widely published is impact of land subsidence in combination with central Jakarta, where Semarang, Demak, and Sayungan really impacted by that. I need to mention among the concerning problem that we are facing right now in regards to the impact of climate change. On the other hand, we have a large variety of communities in Indonesia. Here in Banda Aceh province, kind of urban society, but cannot forget that we still have a large percentage of community who are staying at very isolated places like small islands. In Aceh alone, we have 3 or 4 islands where the number of population are more than 1,000. And around 10 years ago, we have collaboration with Professor it was UNESCO office in Jakarta. We have a project. That project, we try to identify types of local knowledge, popularize and put it back in to increase to impacts of hydro. What we did in 2015. Interestingly, I myself learned something during that process. My background is actually engineering, but then along the process, I learned it's a kind of well, if I can say like a cultural heritage inside our community that can be also very useful to be used to strengthen our community awareness toward natural hazard or impact of the climate change. So that's the story why then we collaborate with URI, with Professor Lisa Iwasaki. Now Professor Iwasaki moved to URI, and we are committed to continue collaborating with Iwasaki and also, of course, our new partner from Laval University of Engineering. At the same time, we have also our partner from Tsunami and Static Archive Agency, or BST. Here, Professor Farhan entered the agency. For about a year, we discussed how to use the historical record or historical archive that related to natural or any disasters that happen around this area to somehow inform the community that we have a long history of disasters. One of the most conspicuous event was tsunami, of course, in this area. Apparently, These have been impacted more than 11 times of tsunamis since 7,500 years ago. That record, that historical tsunami been recorded in one of fossil cave near Banda Aceh here, about 40 kilometers to the west. This kind of archive or this kind of historical data are very useful to remind people that tsunami is not the only thing that happened in 2004. We have 11 times of tsunami back 7,000 years. So this is why then we collaborate and we think that we can join these topics, local knowledge, marine protected areas, and also the using historical archive to increase the awareness of community and also a capacity to cope with the impacts of disaster, helping with impacts of climate. Yeah. So that's the idea of why we are conducting this event for today. And we also would like to thank to Professor Taufik Fuadi Abidin, who represented our rector, for willing to open this event. So I would like also to report to Professor Taufik Fuadi Abidin that this seminar series is a kind of a regular seminar that we conduct every 3 or 4 months. So in a year, we have 3 or 4 seminar series with different types of topics. So today we have this topic, but in the next 2 weeks, we will have another one with different topics. So that's how we do this in order to disseminate and also to discuss with colleagues and partners who are interested in developing capacity in disaster reduction and climate change. So that's my report to all of you, and also to welcome you to this event. Also thanks to the committee for conducting this event, and to all the guests who are coming far away from US, from Canada, from Sabang. Our guests from government of Sabang. Tomorrow we will visit Sabang. I hope also we can see you all there and discuss in more detail about the local knowledge in Sabang, and also in regard with the marine protected areas. Thank you again. So before I end, I would like to also invite Professor Taufik Fuadi Abidin to give remarks and also to officially open this seminar. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much to Professor Dr. Syamsuddin for the welcoming remarks. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my deep pleasure to invite the head of Institute for Research and Community Service of Universitas Syah Kuala to Professor Dr. Taufik Fuadi Abidin. The time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful, peace, mercy, and blessing of Allah be upon Salawat and Salam upon our great Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dear colleague, professor, keynote speakers, audience, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to send a warm regard from our rector, Mr. Marwan, is currently doing this seminar, has to attend the university graduation ceremony in the other side of our university. He asked me to deliver this opening remark on his ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and welcome you to the 25th seminar series on commemorating 27 years of Hakteknas. Great themes that the committee have chosen, talking about the environmental management and adaptation strategy to climate change from the perspective of local knowledge on disaster and regional zoning. I think this is a very interesting topic, as we know that Indonesia as a island, a big island, we always get a threat from the climate change. Welcome and appreciation to the speakers, Professor Lisa Iwasaki from the University of Rhode Island, which is on the north side of the United States, north and east, I guess. Also welcome Professor Steve Derry from Laval University, Canada, which is, and also Bapak Farhan Muhammad Uzair from Balai Arsip Statis Nami, PAS, and also our colleague, Dr. Rina Suryani Oktari, on the back. Okay. Also, Associate Professor Dr. Nur Fadli from the Faculty of Marine and Fisheries. And the moderators, Dr. Alfi Rahman and also Dr. Rizana Ostomeri. I would like to welcome also our friends from Marine and Fisheries Department from Banda Aceh or Sabang, and also from the Office of Development and Planning Agencies, from Regional Disaster Management Agencies, and also Pak Wahyu from MKG. Don't know how to say it in English. Welcome, Pak Wahyu. And also Professor Samsidik, our colleague, the head of this Center of Excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, participants and the committee from this building and also maybe from online on the other side of the globe. I would like to thank all the panelists, all the speakers for accepting our invitations, share your experience. Recognize that you have taken the time and made extra effort flying from the other side of the world to prepare and join with us here to present what you have learned, what you have discovered. I wish to convey my sincere thanks. As an archipelago nation, Indonesia exhibits a more significant threat caused by climate change. Extreme weather, sea level rise, flooding, wide scale, as mentioned by Professor Samsidik, and also other negative impact that affect many lives, not only those who live in the coastal region, but also throughout Indonesia as a whole nation. We need to adapt to this change and reduce its effect on a nation's lives. An adaptive strategy must be considered, especially the local wisdom, local experience that will be discussed today in this great. I really appreciate Prof. Iwasaki from the University of Rhode Island, also Professor Derry, Steve Derry, and Dr. Oktari from our university and Mr. Farhan that will share their thought about this problem. They will introduce some local knowledge which integrates into the adaptation to climate change. I believe that it is a very interesting topic, as we know that there are not too many written records of local knowledge, especially related to climate change adaptation, has been archived. The other strategy that could reduce and slow down the destructive rate of the environment due to climate change is regional zoning. For example, the Marine Protected Area, or MPA. Today, Professor Derry from Laval University, Canada, and also Dr. Fadli from our university will present and discuss about these two topics. In 2006, Universitas Syekh Kuala established the Tsunami and Disaster Mitigation Research Center. With TDMRC, we aim to contribute back to the world after the massive reconstruction and rehabilitation process following the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. With TDMRC in place, we would like to strengthen our regional resilience toward disaster by providing sufficient scientific and technological evidence. TDMRC is one of our center of excellence, our university. And on this occasion, we also commemorate the 22nd year of Hari Kebangkitan Teknologi Nasional, or HAS, or in English, we would say National Technology Awakening Day. For your contribution to discussing the topic presented by the speakers today is very much appreciated. Finally, my deepest gratitude goes to the advisory board and organizing committee of this seminar. I believe that this seminar will be very valuable and very successful. Please accept our sincere apologies to some inconvenience occur before, during, and after the event. Ladies and gentlemen, by stating Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, the 27th seminar series on environmental management and adaptation strategy to climate change from the perspective of local knowledge and disaster and regional zoning is officially open. I wish you very productive, successful, and enjoyable. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much to Professor Dr. Taufik Wadi Abidin for the opening remarks and to officially open our event for today. Next agenda is the distribution of token appreciation for our guest speakers. I would like to invite Professor Lisa Hiwasaki, Professor Steve Derry, and Mr. Farhan to come to the front to receive the token appreciation. And I would like to invite Professor Dr. Taufik Wadi Abidin to give the token appreciation for our guest speakers. Okay, so no is the photo session. Okay, now I would like to invite for the photo session. So for all of you, please remain on the stage. And I would like to invite the VIP first for the first session of photo session. Maybe the speakers and the moderator, please welcome to the front to have a group photo together. And later for the second session, all participants will be invited as well. Okay, now I would like to invite students and all other participants to join us for the group photo. Okay, please welcome. Yeah, we can do it on the stage. Some of us, it will be fit. Okay, thank you so much. Now we will have a short coffee break before we move on to our main agenda. So please serve yourself. There is snack outside and maybe tea and coffee as well. So we will spend about 10 to 15 minutes before we move on to the next session. Okay, so please enjoy.
Pegawaian gitu. Kok ada suara? Dia pakai begitu, mau pakai itu. Karena kamu kan Kaya naglalagay sa pa. Gulay na lang. Kaya hindi ako pagkikita sa kanya na ang kimatsapan. Hindi ko na sa semua, kok nggak ada suara ini? Di luar. Di luar. Ya.
We'll start our main agenda shortly. So for you still enjoying the snacks, please continue. We will begin the session shortly. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, for the first session, I would like to invite Miss Rizana Rosemary as our moderator. So she'll moderate our first session for our three speakers. So Miss Rizana Rosemary, I will introduce her very briefly. She completed her doctoral degree in health communication from the Media and Communication Department, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, University of Sydney, Australia. And her thesis is exploring how women in Indonesia interpret the anti-smoking public service announcement and how social practice has an influence on the woman's meaning-making process towards the message. She has a double master's degree in health communication and in communication studies, Faculty of Social and Political Science, the University of Indonesia. She has worked intensively in research and projects focusing on media and interdisciplinary issues such as health, disaster risk reduction, and environmental issues. Okay, so for Ms. Rizana Rosemary, I will hand over the stage for you, please.
Thank you very much, our MC, Ms. Dwi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all in a good stage. I think the coffee is on the way, so please be patient. I'm Rizana, and it's such an honor for me to be given the opportunity to chair this very important session today, the first session of our seminar series, with our three distinguished speakers that I will introduce and invite them on the stage shortly. So, ladies and gentlemen, and our distinguished guests, I just like to inform you that this first session of the 25 seminar series of TDMRC will focus on the topic of local knowledge and DRR and how both concepts maybe shapes the mitigation and adaptation process of the climate change. And I'm very honored that we have three speakers today, and I'm going to sit among them. So I will like to invite our first speakers. She is Professor Lisa Hiwasaki. Good morning, Professor. She's a social scientist from the University of Rhode Island, USA, with a research focuses on the vulnerability and resilience amid global changes, especially among the marginalized groups in coastal communities. She has 20 years of experience as a dedicated international development professional and 7 years living and working in Southeast Asia. The accounting this year too? No. And she initiated and led more than 10 interdisciplinary research and scientific projects in the field of climate change, adaptation, disaster risk reduction, agriculture and development, and natural resource management. And her accomplishments have focused on integrating social equity, local and indigenous knowledge into her projects. And so welcome, please be seated. And I would like also to invite our second speakers to the stage. Our second speaker is Dr. Rina Suryani Okhtari. She is a lecturer at the Faculty of Medicine of University of Shah Kuala. And she is now also currently a coordinator for disaster education and management research cluster at the Tsunami and Disaster Mitigation Research Center, or TDMRC. Currently acting as Secretary of Indonesian Disaster Management Society, or MPBI. She has more than 10 years of working experience in humanitarian and development issues, including Islamic relief, United Nations, and the Australian government. Welcome, Ibu Okta. I would like also to invite our third speaker, Bapak Farhan Muhammad Uzair. Welcome, Bapak. Pak Farhan is the Archivist Tsunami and Static Archive Center, ANDRI. He has held the position since 2020 until now. And he was also an archivist at the National Archive of Republic of Indonesia until 2019. He completed his master's degree at the International Relations, Brunei University, London in 2015. So before we start, I would just like to inform you that our session is carried out hybrid. So we have an on-site audience and also an online audience, which is all the participation joining us through the link Zoom. And this session will also be delivered in bilingual, in English and Bahasa. So after the presentation later, there will be a Q&A and a session. So for each speaker, if you don't mind, I'll give you 15 minutes to present your talk. So because we could continue to more discussion on that. So without further ado, Professor Lisa Iwasaki will present the topic local knowledge for an integrated approach to climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. Professor Lisa, the time is yours.
Okay. Is it better with this? Okay. Okay. So good morning, everybody. Selamat pagi. Honorable guests, fellow presenters, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, students. Is it better I stand or I sit? I do whatever I want. Okay, I'll stand. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak in front of you today. It's a real honor. And I'd like to share with you today some of my research, present and past. And the research I'll be presenting mostly is based on okay. And so some of the presentation, the work I'll be presenting on is the work as Professor Shamsiddin mentioned that we published in 2014 on local knowledge and disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. And I also want to share with you some of my most. So this is the outline of my, where am I pointing? Here? So like I don't know. There? Oh, good. Magic. So first, I would like to provide some information on local and indigenous knowledge related to disaster risk reduction, including, the definitions, some historical background, and share just one small example of such knowledge. And I'd like to talk about the important role of such knowledge to reduce vulnerability, adaptive capacities, are two integral, not just sustainable development, but also sustainable, equitable development. And then last, I would like to, introduce my current research agenda, part of which I hope to implement with your colleagues at TD, that focuses on providing the evidence for the need to integrate climate change adaptation with disaster reduction, but also integrating local knowledge with science to promote sustainable. Am I speaking too fast? All right, so let me begin. So although social scientists have been documenting local and indigenous knowledge related to observation and practices related to disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation in the 1970s, such work remained pretty marginal, and it was mostly ignored by mainstream scientific literature on hazards, disasters, and climate change, and also by institutions responsible for disaster risk reduction and climate change around the mid 2000s. Local knowledge related to disaster preparedness was often seen by scientists and practitioners with skepticism. This is considered just as myths that local people or like superstitions that local like to. So this really changed in the with the Indian Ocean tsunami in the 2004 ocean earthquake and tsunami in 2004, the knowledge that helped indigenous shape some sort of survive the disaster, some disaster in particular, was publicized widely. So the disaster, while extremely tragic, really played an important role in bolstering existing efforts done, marginally by social scientists that value the significant role that local knowledges and practices play disaster risk. Now, whoops. So now the growing evidence that local knowledge and practices to disaster risk reduction has been now documented in many countries in Asia and in Latin America and also in Africa. That's also the case for climate change adaptation. The knowledge that is relevant to increase our understanding of climate change and adaptation strategies really become more recorded, documented, and valorized, particularly in the Arctic and the Pacific impacts, but also all around the world. So in recent years, we have witnessed some positive steps that have been taken really at all levels, the global level, national levels, and local levels, that recognize the role that local knowledge. I just one example at recognition at the global level of local and in both the first quote here on IPC assessment really talks, that mentions that local knowledge is important, especially adaptation. And also the second set of quotes you see is from the UNI, the Hyogo framework. No, actually this is a Sendai framework. That may contain references that really recognize at the global level the important knowledge in both disaster risk reduction and climate change. So now that I've given just an overview of more the historical context, you might be wondering, what exactly do I mean by when I say local knowledge? And the definition I like to use, and I'm sorry I can't see the top, maybe you can yeah, hide, sorry, the floating. But what it says on the top is local and in knowledge. So the definition I like to use is the one that's used by UNESCO's local knowledge systems group. As Pat Shamsidik mentioned, I was living in Jakarta at that time where I was implementing programs with knowledge Asia and the Pacific. This definition, as you can see, really it's very broad. It encompasses many definitions that are frequent context. Oh, I know. Yes. Yay. Sorry. Local knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, etc. So there's different terms that are used that aren't actually the same, synonymous, but kind of represent the range of words that are used to describe this sort of knowledge. And if you're interested in going into the semantics, we can ask me a question about that. And we can. So in the research I conducted in between 2012 and 2014, Philippines and Timor-Leste with partners, we categorized the whole array of knowledge, local indigenous knowledge related to disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, 4 broad categories. You can see. The first category is folklore, rituals, and ceremonies and festivals like things, demonstrate appreciation for nature, and ask for protection from hazards. And these really increase people's awareness of hazards, reinforce respect for nature, and strengthen community. The second set of categories we used were customary laws that govern behavior, customary laws that bans logging in certain areas, prohibit against building houses in certain areas, etc. And those engender and reinforce the environment and strengthen social cohesion and ultimately result in preventing disasters. Third category is local food materials and structures such as construction, resilient houses, local methods, food processing, and these enable communities to adapt to, mitigate, and prepare for hazards. The last set of category local indigenous knowledge is observations of environmental and climatic changes and other natural phenomena such as prediction of storms or observation of change in sky, sea, wind, the stars. And those help communities predict hazards and adapt to climate change, pardon. So in our study, what we found were the knowledge in the first 2 categories were prevalent in all the sites that we did research. And I'm just going to give one quick example from Timor-Leste because I understand that Ibota is going to talk about such knowledge in Aceh, and I'm do that. So just very quickly, Timor-Leste, so it's actually prohibited snakes, cutting down sacred trees, moving sacred, a lot of these things sacred from removing them, especially riverbanks. And if people remove them and landslides occur and there are people who die from such hazards, for example, it is believed that that was done because people didn't moved sacred things from the riverbanks or killed sacred. And then, so rituals to apologize to nature were held. In addition to reforestation of the affected area. So local scientists that we talked to explained that, the ground becomes fragile and prone to landslides after heavy rain if stones or snake are removed. And so that kind of example shows that although people are in awe of natural hazards, they also see them as something that they can prevent, try to mitigate the impacts of through customary laws. And what you see on the left is a familiar picture. People who have been to Timor-Leste have kind of a sign of Parabandu, which is a customary law that really makes certain things sacred and prohibit behavior that could cause hazards. That's really ensuring respect for nature among the people. So the significance of such prohibitions based on folklore and ritual customary laws was really important. It was very important to the local that we talked to. And that was clearly demonstrated during our discussion. And they considered such knowledge just as effective in mitigating disasters as other knowledge that you see, those at the bottom, these observations of the environment are very predictable, very reliable in predicting climate hazards. But those at the top two, like folklore and customary laws, were also considered by communities as very important for them. And so when you look at the last category, you can also understand that although these are very effective with the changing climate change, they have it's quite possible that these observation hazards can become more unreliable. So in our study of local and indigenous knowledge related to climate change and disaster risk reduction, one of the many things that became to us was at the local level, such knowledge, whether it's for climate change adaptation or disaster risk reduction, they're very similar at the local level. And in fact, other studies that documented or discussed such knowledge in other countries, for example, make it clear that communities were the most impacted by disasters or climate or maldevelopment. Climate change and adaptation and disaster risk reduction are really dealt with in a very integrated manner at the local level. Just an example from a study by Mercer in Papua New Guinea that showed that people she talked to, communities that she talked to, really didn't make a distinction between all the different and negative, the vulnerabilities that they have. And of course, they mentioned, something about climate change, hazards, but these are actually, only a couple of the many factors that negatively impact their vulnerability and that increase the impact of natural hazards. So it's actually very important that any vulnerabilities are dealt with in integrated manner, climate change adaptation, reduction is key important, a key component. So this brings me to my next point, which is the importance of integrating disaster risk reduction with climate change adaptation. Also, I want to talk about vulnerability. Oops, already 15 minutes? Oh dear. Okay, so maybe I will skip. Okay, so I'm gonna skip this. I think I wanted to talk about international agreement and different definition of vulnerability. So I will skip that, and if people want to ask me. But what I want to talk about, just especially in terms of vulnerability, that it's very important to talk about vulnerability in terms of something that is a process that we can that we can change. I really like this idea of vulnerability. That is that we can change. And how can we improve vulnerability for this is a slide I like to use really often to explain to idea of the progression of vulnerability. And I'm just gonna show you to understand is that vulnerability is caused, as you know, not just by exposure to hazards or susceptibility hazards, but the fact that the root causes many different dynamic pressures and many other assets and livelihood assets and environments that people have access to, really the things that contribute to making people vulnerable. And I believe that local knowledge can be really used by us, by people promoting disaster risk reduction to decrease the vulnerability of communities whose resources, at the right-hand side column, are often compromised and thus for whom impacts of hazard. So local knowledge, skills, technologies, and traditional systems of governance and social networks are key components that can strengthen the capacity of the along with other resources and assets that people use to mitigate, cope with, and recover from disasters. And it's really important to note that with local knowledge, it can also increase adaptive capacities and can reduce their vulnerability. And we also need to use the human resources, economic and political resources to help prevent and mitigate communities' negative impacts of community disasters. So when local knowledge is and practices are strengthened, valorized, and used to reduce dynamic pressures, achieve safe locations and sustainable livelihoods, and in hazard prevention and mitigation measures, it will be possible to empower holders of local knowledge and users of such knowledge to reduce their vulnerability and thus lead to their safety. And so these are the components, all these components. So if you can see this progression of safety is progression of vulnerability. These are all the components local knowledge help community, our communities towards progression of. So if you could, in fact, if you could, 4 minutes, I would just. Okay. So because I did want to talk about my research agenda, which I really implementing colleagues in. And the research agenda really focused on integrating local science, integrating disaster risk reduction and climate change, adaptation for focusing not just on sustainable development, but sustainable and equitable. And we want to be working in Vietnam. And I'm not going to talk about this. I wanted to talk about how we could integrate local knowledge with science to improve adaptive capacities and vulnerability. I'm not going to do that because we're running time. Just wanted to share with you a process of integrating such knowledges developed out of before. And yeah, I will finish with this slide because it kind of explains what I want, the kind of research that I really want to be doing in Southeast Asia as part of my my current research agenda is basically understanding the different factors, the root causes, the structural issues, the dynamic pressures, the different livelihood assets that can lead to unequal distribution of resources and access to resource that results in the current model of sustainable development isn't sustainable or equitable. I'm hoping that we can do research, have a better understanding and analysis of all these factors so that we would be able to create both enabling environments and also help local communities use their adaptive capacities so that we can use vulnerabilities that's leading to equitable and sustainable. So with that, I'm sorry I have gone over time. I hand the microphone to I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Professor Lisa. I'm personally impressed by the presentation itself. So I know I'm sorry that I have to use timer for that because of the time constraint. But again, just like to highlight how Professor Lisa have mentioned that local knowledge has recognized, even by worldwide, that it could improve the disaster risk reduction and how it could also apply to the climate change adaptation, and how she also explained her current research, especially in the Southern Asia and the Timor-Leste as an example, on how local knowledge, especially underlying that the vulnerabilities is a process, right, that can change to the future. And I think we can move on to the next speaker, which is Dr. Rina Suryani Okhtari. And like you mentioned, she's just going to talk about more specific about the local knowledge of climate change in Aceh coastal area. Dr. Rina, the time.
Cek. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, everyone. Honorable Professor Lisa, Professor Steve, and Director of TDMRC, and also distinguished guests and all the ladies and gentlemen and the students, especially. Today, I would like to share actually, my research are more on the coastal community resilience, but today the committee asked me to give a presentation about the local knowledge, this is actually Prof. Samsidik should be here to speak about this, but I will try. So my presentation is not only talking about the climate change, because as maybe Professor Lisa mentioned, that we cannot separate between disaster risk reductions and the climate change adaptations. Also, at the national level, the government have many efforts to convergence between these two issues, disaster risk reductions and the climate change adaptations. But as Professor Lisa mentioned, that the community is easier to make these two issues together, because they are living with the hazard, so we cannot separate between the disaster and the climate change. That's why my title now become local knowledge of coastal communities for disaster risk reductions and climate change adaptations. So I would start with my previous research about the assessment on the coastal cities resilience. In my previous research, I used a top-down and bottom-up approach. So not only to assess from the top-down approach, seeing how the resilience of the city, but also using the bottom-up approach to see whether our community resilience or prepared toward the coastal hazard. So as we know that now the coastal area become more vulnerability, because a significant proportions of the world's populations is living in the coastal regions. And also more and more people are living in the area that is, of course, vulnerable to the disaster risk. And coastal area are highly susceptible to the impact of global climate change and the intensity of the coastal hazard. As mentioned by Professor Samsidik and then Professor Lisa, including erosion, storm surge, flooding, and the tsunamis. And this make the significantly impaired social, cultural, and natural assets and vital resources for community living in the low-lying coastal areas. And Professor Lisa also mentioned in her slide about how the important to strengthening the coastal area, including how to integrate the local knowledge. This is stated in the Sustainable Development Goals and also the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reductions. We know that certain conditions severely impact coastal cities that don't have adequate preparations and adaptation strategies. That's why efforts to anticipate and reduce the impact of coastal hazard. This is one of the main focuses in the Sustainable Development Goals and Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reductions. Specifically, they mentions about how the important to incorporate and strengthening the resilience and adapting to the adverse effects of natural hazard and climate change. So this is about the Banda Aceh and how the city is also vulnerable not only for the disaster but also for the climate change impact. As we know, the Banda Aceh was one of the severely affected cities most during the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. And we conduct assessment after 10 years tsunami. People resettle in the coastal area. This is because they are not considered anymore the hazard of the tsunami. So the history of the tsunami event is no longer a consideration of the community in choosing their residence locations. So most of the respondents, they select because of the land or the house rent is cheaper in the tsunami affected area, and also because of the it closer with their working place. And the third one is because of the social interactions between the community. So they no longer consider the hazard of the tsunami when they are selecting of the residence locations. So Banda Aceh also has a relatively flat topography that is very vulnerable, of course, to the impact of the sea level rise. And then Banda Aceh also susceptible to inundations, mostly when tides and sea waves occur. And according to Prof. Samsidik research, Banda Aceh also will likely be submerged by tidal floods in the next 100 years. So this is in the general how the community preparedness toward coastal hazard. We are using the same parameter because we are talking about the coastal hazard. It means that we are talking about the disaster issues and also the climate change issues. And our research shows that all the parameters indicate that the community preparedness index are in the moderate and the low categories. And we can see here how the distributions of the community preparedness index, mostly in the low, which is shown by the yellow color, and then at moderate level of preparedness in the orange color. More specifically, we assess on the how the community knowledge on the coastal hazard. This is very small. Okay. We can see here that most of the community in Banda Aceh, they are lack of information regarding the coastal hazard. And also they experience about the tsunami, but less of the respondents experience the coastal hazard except tsunami. And also about the local traditions, the local knowledge. We also ask about the community, whether they are aware of on the local knowledge that exists in the community regarding the coastal hazard. And most of the respondents, they don't know about the local knowledge. And this is also, we ask about the knowledge sharing among the community regarding the coastal hazard. This is also has a very low response from the community. And in the majority, the respondents claim that they not have been exposed to adequate information about specifically on the sea level rise impact. Because this is also maybe because the community has not felt directly the impact of the sea level rise. This is cause a negative impact at a slow pace and over a long period of time. But of course, this is with a high degree of certainty. And if we talk about the local knowledge of coastal community, this is already mentioned by Professor Lisa that TDMRC has conducted some research to identify the local knowledge and then how this local knowledge is translated or transformed to be a more easy to understand, especially for the students, because as we know that local knowledge is mostly in the older people. So the younger generations, they don't know about this local knowledge. I'm also consider this local knowledge as the importance of the intergenerational knowledge transmissions, because if we want to build our community resilience, it has to be in a sustainable effort. So this is some of the local knowledge, but of course, not only this one, there are many more that already may be documented by our TDMRC researcher. One of them is Hutan Bangka. This is a mangrove forest. There are also several education material that have been developed to educate the students about the Hutan Bangka. So this is the mangrove forest. It's a buffer area for life on the coast. And because this plant has various functions, including as breeding ground for various types of fish and shrimp. And also it has a role to prevent the intrusion of seawater into the mainland and also resisting abrasion. And the second one is the Hutan Arun or fir forest. It's a buffer area on the beach consisting of pine trees. So the waters close to the coast with loss of pine trees based on the experiences of local fishermen are believed to be very favored by certain school of fish, especially shellfish, snapper, grouper, and other as habitat for these fish, which are more attracted to the temperature of the surrounding climate, the beach area. And then the third one is Hutan Pasi. So this is a coastal forest. It's a term for the canopy of forest trees that grow on the beach. So this Hutan Pasi is also a protected forest area for the sake of environmental balance in the coastal area. So among this local knowledge, we also have the local wisdom called Panglima Laut. Professor Lisa already mentioned that the customary law is also one of the local knowledge. So this Panglima Laut is customary institutions that regulate procedures for fishings in the marine zones. And the Panglima Laut is also a form of local wisdom in Aceh related to the fisheries management. This Panglima Laut regulates fishing, regulate the prohibitions of destroying the marine environment, as well as the existence of sea taboos on certain days, which have implications for the functioning of the ecosystem. So actually, this Panglima Laut is already regulated by the local regulations called Kanun, number 9 of 2008, concerning the fostering of indigenous life and custom. So some of the rules of Panglima Laut, including to guards of custom and customary law of marine zones, and then government partners in the fisheries and marine sector, and also resolve dispute among fishermen in accordance with customary law of marine zones, and then maintain and preserve the environmental functions of coastal and marine areas, and then fighting for the improvement of the standard of living of the fishing community. And the last one is to prevent illegal fishing. This is some of the marine custom related to the environmental maintenance in the coastal area, including the prohibitions of cutting or damaging wooden trees on the coastal area, and then prohibitions of bombing, poisoning, and other materials that can damage the environmental and other biota. And then prohibitions of catching fish or other protected marine biota, and then regulate the use of fishing gear and prevent the use of fishing gear that damage the network, and restriction of fishing area in certain area of fish habitat. And then another thing is the prohibitions of the use of fishing gear that is not friendly to the environmental. So this is also another important issue if we are talking about the disaster and the climate change. One of our colleagues at the University of Kuala also concerns about this Tripa pit swamp forest. So it is they are advocating that the Tripa pit swamp forest to be a natural laboratory. So there should be effort to protect this area, because currently this Tripa pit swamp has been used as palm oil plantations. We know that Tripa plays important role in the system of watershed hydrology because of its ability to absorb water up to several times higher than its weight, and its functions as the enormous carbon reserves storage either from above or below ground level. And another thing is because this Tripa pit swamp forest has many interesting things that can be studied or researched, especially in the issues of the climate change. And some of the researchers found that there are typical swamp plants that can adapt to aerobic inundation, which is a meeting between swamp water and tides. And there are also certain plants are obtained using certain activate substance naturally so that they can survive in the tidal inundations area. So this close my presentations, and looking forward to have feedback and discussions from all of you. Thank you very much, and I give the time to moderator.
Thank you very much. Just on time. Thank you for that interesting presentation. So yeah, Dr. Rina has highlighted some of her research, current research on the community preparedness. And it is interesting how most of the people still live in the coastal area despite, because they have no consideration about the hazard of tsunami. And she found that there is a moderate and low category, especially the lack of information on the hazards of the tsunami itself. And yes, the concept of Panglima Laut maybe will also be discussed further on the second session with Pak Alfi and all the other speakers. Thank you, Dr. Rina. Now we will move on to the third speakers, Bapak Farhan Muhammad Uzair. As mentioned before, Bapak Farhan, for this opportunity, he will present it in Bahasa. So probably for Professor Steve and Professor Lisa, if you need any assistance with translation, Pak Samsidik could help, and also Dr. Rina could help Professor Lisa with that. So the time is yours, Bapak Farhan.
Thank you, Dr. Rizana. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Puji syukur, marilah sama-sama kita panjatkan kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Salawat dan salam kepada baginda Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Honorable to the head of the TDMRC, Professor Samsidik. Honorable to all guests from the government agencies and distinguished speakers, Prof. Lisa, Prof. Steve, and Dr. Rina, and also Dr. Nur Fadli, and to all participants online and offline. Honestly, I really want to deliver this presentation in English, but I have not spoken English for more than 8 years. It makes my English gotten rusty. Therefore, in this occasion, allow me to deliver this presentation in Bahasa Indonesia. Jadi, insya Allah hari ini kita akan materi yang akan saya sampaikan berkaitan tentunya dengan pelestarian arsip dalam menghadapi ancaman bencana. Nah, sebagaimana kita ketahui bahwa lingkungan terkait dengan masalah lingkungan atau perubahan iklim itu merupakan salah satu dari bencana. Nah, jadi kalau kita lihat dari definisi ancaman itu sendiri, bahwa dalam sudut pandang ancaman negara itu ada non-militer dan militer. Jadi bencana alam itu merupakan bencana non-militer, termasuk salah satunya adalah perubahan iklim yang sering kerap kali terjadi di daerah kita. Nah, untuk itu tentu perlu adanya upaya dalam menghadapi ancaman tersebut, termasuk upaya dalam melindungi arsip-arsip sebagai memori penting yang bernilai bagi keberlangsungan bangsa dan bernegara. Nah, kita tahu bahwa pada tahun 2004 terjadi bencana yang sangat dahsyat di tanggal 26 Desember pada hari Minggu. Nah, tentunya peristiwa ini telah menghancurkan seluruh lini kehidupan masyarakat. Nah, bahkan tsunami mencapai ke beberapa negara, termasuk ke Sri Lanka, India, Malaysia, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Thailand, bahkan sampai ke Afrika. Tentunya telah menghancurkan banyak hal di berbagai tempat. Nah, tentunya peristiwa tsunami tersebut juga tidak hanya memakan korban jiwa, tapi juga ternyata arsip. Nah, mungkin bagi sebagian nggak ada yang tahu bahwa pada saat itu Arsip Nasional Republik Indonesia turun ke Aceh untuk melihat bagaimana kondisi yang terjadi terhadap arsip. Intinya mereka sebagai menjalankan fungsinya untuk melakukan pelestarian terhadap arsip-arsip penting. Nah, pada saat itu adalah arsip pertanahan yang juga terdampak oleh bencana tsunami. Ada 13 ton arsip yang kemudian dibawa ke Jakarta untuk direstorasi karena terdampak oleh bencana tsunami. Nah, tentunya arsip-arsip tersebut sangat penting untuk diselamatkan, karena berdasarkan arsip itu maka BPN dapat membuat kembali sertifikat tanah, mengembalikan hak-hak keperdataan masyarakat. Karena kita tahu setelah tsunami banyak rumah-rumah yang hancur dan kita nggak tahu lagi batas-batas wilayah kepemilikan tanah orang-orang yang menjadi korban ataupun yang terdampak dari tsunami. Sehingga dari arsip-arsip tersebut kemudian bisa dibuat kembali untuk mengembalikan hak-hak masyarakat. Tentunya banyak hal yang juga mungkin bermasalah pada saat itu. Mau lagi ya? Oke, nah ini foto-foto pada saat itu. Ini beberapa foto yang kemudian arsip-arsipnya dibawa berton-ton, 13 ton menggunakan Hercules ke Jakarta, kemudian dimasukkan ke freezer agar tidak terjadi bakteri, sehingga harus di-freezerkan dulu kalau tidak direstorasi, kemudian baru dibersihkan dan setelah selesai dikembalikan lagi ke Aceh. Nah, tentunya beranjak dari peristiwa ini, kemudian Arsip Nasional Republik Indonesia berusaha menyelamatkan arsip Badan Rehabilitasi dan Rekonstruksi Aceh. Nah, setelah itu karena mereka sudah melakukan penataan arsip, kemudian BRR menyerahkan arsipnya ke ANRI, sehingga ANRI pada tahun 2009 itu membentuk Balai Arsip Tsunami pada saat itu, Balai Arsip Tsunami Aceh atau BATA. Kemudian pada 2017 Arsip Nasional Indonesia kemudian mengembangkan BST sehingga tidak hanya arsip tsunami yang dilestarikan, tapi juga arsip lembaga vertikal yang ada di Aceh. Dan kemudian pada saat ini Balai Arsip Statis dan Tsunami sekarang ini sudah memiliki 4 fungsi, yaitu mulai dari akuisisi, pengolahan arsip, kemudian preservasi dan layanan. Nah, ini fasilitas yang kita miliki. Sebenarnya para mahasiswa sangat diajak untuk sering-sering datang ke Balai Arsip Statis dan Tsunami, karena kita sudah memiliki fasilitas yang dapat digunakan untuk ruang bacanya, untuk membaca arsip dan lain sebagainya, ataupun untuk mencari informasi berkaitan dengan peristiwa tsunami dan lain sebagainya. Nah, kita tahu bahwa di Aceh banyak sekali bencana alam. Kalau berdasarkan rilis dari BPBA beberapa waktu lalu, masih di bulan Agustus, kalau nggak salah saya tanggal 2, itu bencana di Aceh itu hampir terjadi dari Januari ke Juli aja, itu udah 283 peristiwa bencana di Aceh. Kebakaran, kemudian kebakaran pemukiman, kemudian ada kebakaran hutan, lahan, angin puting beliung, banjir. Nah, tentunya semuanya ini disebabkan oleh, ada beberapa dari bencana ini disebabkan oleh perubahan iklim. Nah, dampak dari bencana itu ya tentunya sarana pendidikan rusak, sarana kesehatan, sarana pemerintahan, rumah ibadah dan lain sebagainya. Di beberapa tempat ini tentu ada yang menyimpan arsip yang juga terdampak dari bencana Nah, di Undang-Undang tentang Kebencanaan pasal 6 itu disebutkan bahwa harus adanya pemeliharaan arsip dokumen otentik dan kredibel dari ancaman dan dampak bencana. Jadi ketika bencana terjadi, ya memang tentu yang utama harus diselamatkan adalah jiwa, tapi juga kita tidak mengesampingkan arsip yang menjadi rujukan kita ataupun arsip-arsip penting yang memang harus diselamatkan. Nah, tentunya dari peristiwa tersebut akan ada dampak bagi pemerintah, masyarakat, ataupun bagi semuanya. Masyarakat tentunya itu pasti sangat terdampak, dan juga pemerintahan, semua masyarakat, termasuk instansi pemerintah, bahkan ke entitas terkecil yaitu keluarga. Itu udah pasti. Karena kalau arsip rusak di keluarga, pasti akan sangat ribet untuk ngurusnya kembali. Nah, tentunya ada beberapa tahap penyelamatan arsip dari bencana. Berapa menit lagi? Sebanyak ya? Oke. Jadi untuk penyelamatan arsip dari bencana, tentunya ada 3 tahap, yaitu pra-bencana ataupun pre-disaster, ataupun kemudian tanggap darurat, emergency response, kemudian pasca bencana. Nah, di mana-mana pasti mungkin 3 ini sering dibahas itu dalam hal yang berbeda. Kalau kita di kearsipan, 3 ini, nah, ini kondisi arsip di salah satu lembaga vertikal, mungkin tidak perlu kita sebutkan namanya. Saya harap, ya saya yakin di Unsyah pasti arsipnya nggak seperti ini ya, pasti sangat rapi. Apalagi Unsyah juga punya lembaga kearsipan yang baru-baru ini sudah didirikan, pastinya sudah bisa ditata dengan lebih baik, sehingga hasil-hasil penelitian pun bisa diakses dengan mudah oleh masyarakat ataupun mahasiswa yang ingin melakukan penelitian. Nah, kalau kondisinya seperti ini, ya tentu kalau bencana, ya siapa yang mau ngambil arsip penting, mana yang penting, mana yang nggak penting, itu nggak ada yang tahu. Nah, kalau misalnya udah ditata, itu gampang, kita bisa ngambil mana yang penting. Kalau misalnya seperti ini, ya udah, mungkin jangankan nggak tahu lagi kita. Bahkan pernah kejadian ketika banjir di Aceh Utara, mungkin hanya kita saja. Saya mendengarkan dari teman saya, jadi ketika itu banjir, ada instansi yang jangankan menyelamatkan arsip yang sudah ada itu kalau bisa dilempar ke dalam air, biar nggak perlu ditata lagi. Jadi nggak ada ruang tempat penyimpanan pun nggak penuh lagi. Nah, itu jadi masalah, karena kalau misalnya ketahuan bisa kena ancaman dari ya undang-undang ya. Kemudian upaya pelestarian arsip tadi ada prabencana. Pada saat situasi tidak terjadi bencana, tentu ada beberapa hal yang harus kita perhatikan. Ya, mungkin ini lebih kepada instansi yang ada baik di Aceh maupun di manapun ya. Tentunya kita harus melihat dulu jenis bencana yang kerap kali terjadi, kemudian apa kira-kira kerusakan yang dapat diakibatkan oleh bencana tersebut. Kemudian kita nyusun SOP-nya, prasarananya, kemudian juga kita coba menghindari untuk tidak terlalu dekat dengan akses lokasi bencana atau membatasi jika memang ada tempat yang bisa berpotensi bencana. Kemudian upaya preventif, nah, suhu dan kelembaban ruangan penyimpanan. Nah, ini mungkin agak kalau di arsip nasional udah pasti kita sangat memperhatikan ini, suhu kelembaban, karena arsip yang disimpan itu bukan untuk sekarang, tapi bahkan untuk 100, 200, bahkan ratusan tahun kemudian yang dapat digunakan oleh generasi yang akan datang. Bahan simpan arsip, fumigasi, ini tentu kalau kita bahas mungkin perlu berjam-jam teknis untuk masalah penyimpanan dan lain sebagainya. Kemudian sarana dan prasarana, yaitu ruang penyimpanan, standar gedung penyimpanan, dan standar peralatan. Kalau memang kita mau belajar, ya silakan Bapak Ibu bisa berkunjung ke BASD untuk melihat bagaimana sih standar-standar yang kita gunakan untuk pelestarian arsip. Nah, kemudian upaya pelestarian arsip. Nah, kalau misalnya ada potensi bencana, tentunya kita harus siap siaga, kemudian juga merencanakan mitigasi bencana sehingga dapat mengurangi resiko yang terjadi. Jadi ini ada beberapa hal, nanti silakan dilihat kembali. Kemudian upaya pelestarian arsip atau tanggap darurat, emergency response, ketika bencana terjadi. Nah, itu biasanya kita menentukan dulu lokasi alternatif yang dapat kita gunakan untuk menyelamatkan arsip. Kemudian tingkat kerusakan prasarana-sarana kearsipan, kerusakan arsip ataupun kemampuan SDM yang dapat membantu untuk merestorasi kembali arsip jika memang terjadi bencana. Kemudian juga penyelamatan arsip yang terkena bencana, evakuasi, kita identifikasi arsip-arsipnya mana yang penting, mana yang enggak, kemudian kita pulihkan. Kalau yang enggak penting itu bisa dimusnahkan, tentu dengan persetujuan dari arsip nasional. Kemudian juga penyimpanan arsip, di mana harus kita simpan arsip untuk sementara waktu sebelum arsipnya di restorasi kembali. Kemudian upaya pelestarian arsip pasca bencana. Tentu ada rehabilitasi, rekonstruksi, dan pendokumentasian. Jadi rehabilitasi itu kita coba perbaiki sarana kearsipan yang rusak akibat bencana apapun itu. Kemudian pemulihan fungsi pelayanan arsip tentunya. Kalau di lembaga kearsipan kita ada istilahnya pelayanan arsip, bagaimana mengembalikan agar arsip itu bisa diakses kembali oleh masyarakat. Kemudian rekonstruksi, kita bangun kembali jika memang ada kerusakan ya harus kita perbaiki. Kemudian juga meningkatkan pelayanan kearsipan. Dan terakhir pendokumentasian dan laporan ini sangat penting. Karena kalau misalnya terjadi bencana, ada arsip tidak didokumentasikan, arsip itu terkena bencana ataupun ada arsip yang rusak, tidak didata, kalau terjadi sesuatu ditanya mana arsipnya, kita tidak bisa membuktikan. Itu akan menjadi masalah juga. Tapi kalau kita punya laporan, punya bukti, punya foto dan lain sebagainya, lengkap, maka tidak akan kena sanksi. Karena memang itu adalah sebuah bencana yang terjadi. Nah, ini kondisi arsip lembaga yang rapi, bandingkan saja dengan kondisi yang sebelumnya tentu sangat sulit. Yang sebelah kiri saya itu kondisi arsip aktif yang masih digunakan. Kalau yang sebelah kanan saya ini kondisi arsip inaktif ataupun arsip statis yang disimpan di dalam roll bag. Kalau ini dalam filing kabinet. Nah, tentunya ini prasarana kearsipan, ada box arsip dan lain sebagainya, folder itu juga sangat penting untuk menata arsip yang kita miliki. Masih lama? 2 menit. Aduh. Oke, ini cara menyelamatkan arsip. Ya, tentu yang tadi sudah saya bahas, evakuasi, membersihkan arsip di kotoran lumpur. Ini adalah langkah-langkah kita lakukan ketika arsip terdampak bencana. Nah, tentu ini butuh waktu kalau jumlah arsipnya banyak, tapi kalau arsipnya sedikit ya mungkin tidak terlalu banyak waktu yang habis. Kemudian ada restorasi. Yang terakhir restorasi. Jika arsipnya rusak, kita restorasi. Nah, pengeringan arsip pun kita nggak boleh keringin arsip itu di matahari. Karena kalau dikeringin di matahari itu dijamin nggak akan bisa dipakai lagi. Lengket dan dia akan membatu. Tapi dikeringinnya kita pakai suhu kipas angin sehingga dia masih bisa diperbaiki. Nanti kalau ada pertanyaan terkait itu bisa ditanyakan. Nah, kemudian arsip pribadi. Nah, ini yang paling penting. Kita sering lupa arsip keluarga. Saya yakin banyak di sini arsipnya ada di mana-mana ya, ada di satu lemari dan atau mungkin bertebaran ya. Kecuali yang memang rajin nyimpan arsip pribadi. Jadi contoh arsip keluarga itu ada sertifikat tanah, ijazah, surat nikah, kartu penduduk, data kependudukan, surat wasiat dan lain sebagainya. Ini sangat penting untuk kita jaga. Nah, ini salah satu arsip yang kena bencana pada banjir di Lutsukun. Ini nggak tahu nih yang mana yang penting, mana nggak penting, karena nggak dipisahkan. Sebelah kiri juga ya seperti itu kondisi arsip mungkin di sebagian rumah kita ya, kita pokoknya yang penting nyimpan aja. Nah, apalagi seperti ini. Ini kalau pulang-pulang lihat arsip kondisi seperti ini pasti bingung nih. Apa yang harus dilakukan ya? Ini rayap. Nah, rayap juga biasanya karena pengaruh iklim. Kali kalau lembab ya, kalau misalnya kondisi lembab pasti rayap sangat suka. Ini jadi makanan utamanya ya. Jadi kalau udah kayak gini mau diapain lagi? Kalau di restorasi ini bisa, tapi informasinya informasi akan sangat sulit untuk merestorasi informasi. Jadi apa yang sisanya itulah yang menjadi informasi. Tapi ini menjadi bukti bahwa ini masih bisa digunakan. Kalau untuk bukti bahwa kita pernah punya ini punya itu, maka ini tetap menjadi bukti utama meskipun sudah dimakan rayap. Nah, jadi jangan sekali-sekali kalau udah dimakan rayap langsung dibuang, tapi dijaga dulu, dibersihkan. Nah, ini arsip juga di daerah Aceh Utara. Ini dikirimkan ke saya, tanya gimana cara perbaikinya. Saya bilang ya dibersihkan saja, kemudian disimpan karena suatu saat akan diperlukan. Kemudian pelestarian arsip pribadi keluarga dari ancaman bencana itu lebih kurang sama, tapi tentunya ini ada beberapa yang dilakukan, kita identifikasi. Kalau misalnya di rumah itu ada arsip yang berantakan, kita cek dulu mana arsip yang penting, mana yang nggak penting. Jadi kita pilah-pilah istilahnya, kemudian kita tata. Kalau misalnya mau buat daftar ya bisa kita buat daftar di nomor berapa kita simpan arsip, di mana kita simpan. Itu ada ini ada cara-caranya. Kemudian alih media ini sangat penting. Kita kadang-kadang udah alih media tapi kita simpan tadi mana-mana. Sekarang sebenarnya gampang. Kalau kita mau alih media, kita bisa scan, kita simpan di cloud. Bisa kita ambil di mana aja. Kita mau ke ke luar negeri pun kita bisa akses, nggak perlu kita bawa fisiknya. Karena saya yakin kalau di luar negeri mereka nggak akan minta fisik. Yang penting ada bukti, udah selesai. Jadi kalau teman-teman mau silakan di alih media, di scan arsipnya, disimpan di cloud. Nah, nanti kapan mau diakses ya bisa diakses. Kemudian enkapsulasi. Nah, ini metode yang mungkin kalau di Aceh itu sering orang laminasi ya, laminating. Nah, itu sangat tidak dianjurkan karena akan rusak. Itu kalau kena banjir, kena air masuk, itu pasti nggak akan bisa direstorasi. Tapi kalau dia enkapsulasi, itu masih bisa diselamatkan dan dia tidak akan dimakan oleh rayap.
Farhan, mohon maaf waktunya
Ya,
habis Bapak.
Minta izin 3 menit lagi ya. Tadi yang lain dikasih, saya kan kasih juga. Baik, saya percepat. Oke, ini tas arsip, kemudian siaga bencana. Ini kita harus selalu siap untuk menyelamatkan arsip-arsip pribadi kita. Nah, ini arsip yang udah dienkapsulasi kan sangat gampang, sangat indah. Kita simpan rapi, tidak dimakan rayap, dan kemudian kita scan, bisa kita akses kemana aja, ini tinggal kita simpan di tempat yang aman. Ini arsip ketika saya SD ya, nih, yang warna merah. Jadi masih sangat rapi, alhamdulillah. Saya dari kecil suka ini bukan laminating, ini enkapsulasi. Nah, jadi Bapak Ibu yang mau enkapsulasi arsip, beda. Kalau laminating itu dipres. Kalau ini dia masih bisa dibuka, masih bisa diambil arsipnya. Kalau Bapak Ibu mau bisa datang ke Balai Arsip Statis dan Tsunami untuk minta dienkapsulasi arsipnya. Tapi jangan banyak-banyak ya. Gratis. Nah, tapi untuk enkapsulasi ya. Kalau restorasi, kalau nggak rusak berat mungkin bisa, tapi kalau rusak berat harus dikirim ke Jakarta. Tapi kalau untuk enkapsulasi, kemarin di pameran kita juga ada buka booth enkapsulasi arsip waktu di rumah Aceh ya. Ya, rumah Aceh. Jadi ini contoh enkapsulasi. Silakan mungkin adik-adik mahasiswi datang ke balai, bawa 5-4 arsip minta dienkapsulasi di layanan. Saya ngos-ngosan nih karena buru-buru.
Iya Bapak.
Kemudian penyelamatan arsip keluarga ini hampir sama, lebih kurang seperti kita membersihkan arsip lainnya. Ini kalau mau belajar datang ke balai, yang mau magang boleh nanti kita bisa praktek sama-sama dalam menyelamatkan arsip.
Oke.
Nah, jadi kegiatan pelestarian arsip itu merupakan bagian penting dari bagian dari adaptasi kita lah, ataupun strategi yang dapat kita implementasikan di manapun untuk menghadapi berbagai ancaman bencana termasuk perubahan iklim, sehingga nanti arsip kita meskipun ada bencana kita bisa menjaga arsip kita. Nah, mungkin ke depan ya menarik tadi terkait dengan local knowledge, kita mungkin saat ini belum buat penelitian bagaimana arsip-arsip di masyarakat itu yang dulu yang disimpan itu caranya bagaimana. Saya pernah saya dengar katanya ada yang menggunakan bahan-bahan dapur dan lain sebagainya untuk menjaga arsip tetap rapi dan tidak dimakan rayap. Bahkan kita di Aceh punya perpustakaan tertua di Nusantara. Ada yang tahu? Tanah HB. Perpustakaan Salamun Tanah HB itu masih ada sampai sekarang dan itu sangat bernilai. Nah, mungkin suatu saat kita bisa bikin penelitian sama-sama terkait bagaimana merawat arsip dengan local knowledge masyarakat dulu menjaga arsipnya, sehingga bisa kita padukan dengan cara-cara modern dan lain sebagainya. Mungkin itu dari saya. Mohon maaf jika ada kekurangan karena waktunya 15 menit jadi buru-buru. Baik, terima kasih. Saya mohon maaf jika ada yang kurang. Saya akhiri. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik, terima kasih. Thank you very much, Bapak Farhan. It's very interesting, right? For me, I actually, it's my first time understanding how is the importance of preserving archive, yeah? And his last statement is about how to probably to understand more about how the local knowledge in preserving archive itself. We're supposed to have 15 minutes for discussion, but because of, we have spent more times on the presentation, I don't know, Pak Haikal, you still have? Okay. So I would like to open for Q&A now, but if you don't mind, I would like first to give the opportunity to our honorable guests. We have here Bapak Wahyudin from BMKG, and then Bapak M. Farahi from BPBD Kota Banda Aceh, Bapak Haris Haris also from BMKG, Lifriza from DKP Sabang, and Ibu Zakia from BPBD Kota Banda Aceh, and Bapak Ismail from Bapeda Kota Sabang, Bapak Ismail. So if our guests would like to give comments or questions on our three speakers on their presentation, I would like to give the for you all. You could deliver it in Bahasa or in English. We could try to translate it. Pak Wahyu, probably, is there anything that you'd like to add or to comment? No, from Ibu from Sabang? Yes, please. Oh, from Banda Aceh. Yeah, Ibu. Ibu Zakia from BPBD Kota Banda Aceh. Silakan Ibu.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih atas kesempatannya Ibu. Tapi saya ingin apresiasi ya untuk Badan Arsip, khususnya dalam kebencanaan ini adalah info dan ilmu terbaru bagi saya dan ini sangat penting gitu ya, khususnya untuk ketahanan keluarga. Tadi banyak sekali arsip-arsip keluarga yang selama ini itu memang masih minim sekali pengetahuan ya di keluarga untuk bagaimana menyimpan arsip. Nah seperti itu. Kemudian harapannya gitu ya Pak, bahwa ilmu ini kita bisa sharing ke BPBD di seluruh Aceh khususnya karena memang kita daerah kita ini kan sangat rawan bencana gitu ya, khususnya Banda Aceh di mana pengalaman kita musibah tsunami itu kan itu sampai ke Lamtemen gitu. Artinya begitu banyak keluarga ya yang akan merasakan imbasnya. Jadi sangat penting jika ini nantinya bisa kita sharing bersama-sama melalui edukasi mungkin ke masyarakat tentang bagaimana menyelamatkan arsip pribadi mereka dalam rangka menghadapi bencana dan perubahan iklim. Mungkin itu saja. Terima kasih dari saya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Ibu Zakia. So Ibu Zakia representing BPBD Kota Banda Aceh, and especially for her, it's her first knowledge about what Mr. Farhan have mentioned about preserving the archive. And she was hoping that, Mr. Farhan, you have a slot to give an education to BPBD and from other districts. So that's just a suggestion, not questions. So if there's no other questions from our honorable guests, I would like to open the floor, the questions for audience on site or even online. Raise your hand, yeah, please. Mention a name and your affiliation and deliver the question to what speaker.
Okay, thank you. Sebenarnya saya mau nanya ke Profesor Lisa, but honestly, I'm bad at speaking English, so can I ask in bahasa? Of course. Jadi yang saya dapat dari Prof. Fujiwara tadi ya, menekankan bahwasanya kearifan lokal ataupun pengetahuan lokal itu adalah salah satu sumber daya utama ya dalam adaptasi perubahan iklim di masyarakat lokal. Nah, seiring dengan berjalannya waktu, otomatis kan perubahan iklim ini makin cepat ya. Kira-kira bisa nggak kita internalisasikan ilmu sains dengan mitigasi bencana di masyarakat lokal? Sehingga pengetahuan lokal mereka nggak rusak, tapi sains juga dapat bagi mereka gitu. Terima kasih. Nama saya Faris, maaf lupa lagi. Faris.
So, thank you, Faris. It's a very important question. I hope I could catch that. Please add if I miss some points on that. So his question is to you, Professor Lisa, and he was quite impressed with the concept of local knowledge and local wisdom and how it could apply for disaster risk reduction. But the problem is when you mention it also could apply to the CCA or climate change adaptation. But the point that climate change is revolving very quickly at the moment, but how to preserve our local knowledge without ruining it, but then still we could promote science and how people could really adapt to the climate change. I think I hope that
So thank you. So if I understand correctly, you're asking how we can use local knowledge to promote climate change adaptation when the climate is changing, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think that's why it's very important. And of course, I didn't have time, so I didn't really talk about this. It's very important not to too much romanticize local knowledge and say that's everything that's local knowledge is perfect, it's going to work, because obviously, and that's one thing that we really have to understand, is that local knowledge also evolves. So it's not something that, local knowledge, maybe even Pangnya Laut and other things, it's not like they haven't changed over the years, right? And local knowledge is something that also changes with time. And when climate change, when people observe that climate is changing, that knowledge also evolves. That said, so that's important to note. That said, it's also very important to note that the rate at which the climate is changing is maybe too fast for local knowledge to kind of change with. And so that becomes a challenge. And I think that's where really the importance of integrating with science really helps, because scientific knowledge can evolve maybe a bit faster than local knowledge, in the sense that it's using more, technology, high tech, information, etc. So when we integrate, when we're able to effectively integrate local knowledge with the latest scientific knowledge and technology, I think that's when we can really make use of local knowledge, at the same time benefiting from the latest technology, so that we can still have more, local knowledge based latest information that can help us adapt better to climate. I hope that answers.
Very clear. I don't have to translate, right? So is there any other question? It's from
Can we have the online audience?
Oh, yes,
We
please.
say
There's,
one online audience and then
has
another
raised
one
his hand.
on site. Yeah.
Okay. Is Bapak Fazli? Bapak Fazli from BPBA Provinsi Aceh. Silakan Bapak.
Ya, selamat siang. Selamat pagi menjelang siang nih. Kedengaran suaranya?
Kedengaran jelas Bapak.
Baik. Terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan. I will talk in bahasa. Terkait dengan pengelolaan lingkungan, saya melihat karena ada kebutuhan, makanya lingkungan itu menjadi rusak. Contoh pengerusakan hutan yang luar biasa yang kita lihat selama ini. Kemudian di samping itu adanya galian C yang terjadi di banyak titik yang ada di Aceh ini. Saya melihat kedua kebutuhan ini, kedua fenomena ini menjadi poin yang paling sangat menentukan di dalam kerusakan lingkungan. Nah, barangkali upaya-upaya apa yang harus kita lakukan, kami sebagai BPBA dan TDMRC barangkali dan dinas-dinas yang terkait untuk melakukan upaya-upaya mencegah kerusakan lingkungan yang disebabkan oleh, karena memang kebutuhan ini seperti galian C ini kebutuhan masyarakat, mau tidak mau itu harus dilakukan. Begitu juga dengan kerusakan hutan ini juga kebutuhan yang harus yang dibutuhkan oleh masyarakat. Nah, itu barangkali pertanyaan saya, upaya-upaya apa barangkali yang sangat konkret yang perlu segera harus dilakukan supaya illegal logging ataupun galian C ini dapat segera di-manage sedemikian rupa. Demikian barangkali moderator, terima kasih.
Terima kasih Bapak Fazli. Like to try to translate his questions. So his question is actually about the current phenomenon on deforestation, and please help me on translating galian C. What is it? What is galian C? Oh, sand mining. Thank you for that. So deforestation and sand mining is it's a very current phenomena, and it's also happening in Aceh at the moment. So is there any tips or strategy from all of the speakers here how to prevent the environmental damage because of those two conditions. Ibu Oktay would like to start first.
Terima kasih Pak Fazli. Ini saya mencoba sharing juga ya. Artinya mungkin nanti juga sebenarnya dari para speaker yang lain ada masukan. Tapi terkait permasalahan lingkungan ini tidak bisa ini menjadi tanggung jawab pemerintah saja. Tapi seperti yang memang sudah menjadi sudah menjadi digembar-gemborkan gitu ya, kaitannya dengan pentahelix, kaitannya dengan bagaimana sinergisitas antara pemerintah, LSM, akademisi, media, masyarakat. Nah itu semuanya harus berkontribusi. Jadi karena kerusakan lingkungan ini kan dia kalau dia terjadinya secara masif dan kadang-kadang tidak bisa dikontrol, sehingga memang perlu keterlibatan banyak pihak. Dan ini juga perlu diperkuat dengan regulasi. Bahkan kalau sudah ada regulasi pun kadang-kadang itu juga tidak menjamin gitu ya. Tadi yang seperti kasus rawa tripa yang saya sampaikan ya, bahkan itu sudah ada keputusan dari nasional juga, di tingkat lokal juga ada, tapi tetap itu tidak bisa mengontrol ternyata. Artinya memang perlu juga upaya-upaya dari akar rumput gitu ya, untuk bisa mengadvokasikan masalah kerusakan lingkungan ini. Nah, saya belajar kemarin justru waktu saya diberikan kesempatan untuk berbagi dengan ini kelompok perempuan yang mereka memang dilatih sebagai istilahnya saya lupa istilahnya. Pokoknya mereka yang mengadvokasi terjadinya kerusakan hutan itu memang dibina oleh Yayasan HK gitu ya. Nah, bagaimana ini kelompok-kelompok perempuan ini bekerja dari akar rumput ya, mereka yang melakukan advokasi ketika ada kerusakan lingkungan yang terjadi. Nah, mereka coba juga menyuarakan gitu. Artinya memang pendekatan itu harus dilakukan secara holistik. Dan seperti tadi ya, asesmen yang kami lakukan untuk mengkaji cities resilient itu harus pendekatan top down dan bottom up gitu. Jadi ada kebijakan juga, ada kontrol dari atas, tapi juga ada gerakan dari akar rumput gitu. Dan ya ini mungkin menjadi tanggung jawab kita bersama. Mungkin itu yang bisa saya sharing.
I have no suggestions or anything on how to solve that, but I think from the perspective of local knowledge, I did want to say is that, when things like deforestation or, sand mining happens and the biodiversity loss occurs, very important to acknowledge that with it, the local knowledge the traditional ecological knowledge associated with the biodiversity is also lost. So, and also when that sort of traditional ecological knowledge is lost, then, a group of people's cultures and maybe even language and other worldviews that are very closely associated with the biodiversity is so lost. So I think as probably following from what Dr. Okta was saying, it's very important also from the bottom up and top down approach to make sure that we're not just talking about biodiversity loss as a loss, but also the loss of the knowledge and the people's cultures and worldviews and languages that are associated with it, because that is also lost, and that is such is a big loss that really should be really taken into consideration when you're doing conservation. That's all I want. Thank you.
Arfan, do you want to add something? Ada? Oke.
Mungkin tambahan tadi namanya paralegal perempuan. Belum terlalu familiar, tapi ini peran-peran seperti ini justru sangat dibutuhkan karena mereka yang langsung melihat di lapangan gitu. Jadi itu pendekatan yang sangat bagus sekali. Jadi makanya mungkin juga perlu tadi mengintegrasikan apa namanya yang kaitannya dengan scientific knowledge dan juga local knowledge juga itu juga menjadi inilah penting gitu untuk dilakukan.
Bapak Fazli, semoga cukup jelas. Sedikit saja dari Profesor Lisa tadi, beliau hanya menambahkan atau mengkonfirmasi apa yang sudah disampaikan Ibu Dr. Rina. Jadi memang adanya perlu berbagai pendekatan dan bahwa sebenarnya biodiversitas itu sebenarnya harus dianggap bukan hanya itu yang dipandang sebagai sesuatu yang hilang, tapi ketika kehilangan akan local knowledge itu juga menjadi hal yang harus menjadi perhatian bersama. Saya rasa sudah habis ya Pak Hekal ya. Saya mohon maaf, memang ada satu lagi pertanyaan tadi, Bapak ada sudah raise hand di online. Saya mohon maaf Bapak, karena panitia sudah meminta saya ini, barangkali nanti bisa dituliskan saja pertanyaannya. Yeah, for anyone who have other question, you could just write, and then maybe you could address. We could address to Professor Lisa and the other speakers, and then they would kindly respond to it. I'm very sorry because the time is we reached the end of the session. I'm sorry I could not open for other discussion, but it was a fruitful one. Much appreciated to all our three distinguished speakers for their valuable insights, and for all the participants both on-site and online for their well participation. As the moderator, for all the shortcomings during moderating, I apologize, and thank you very much for your attention. I'll hand over the mic to RMC. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, so for all the guests, please remain on the stage because we would like to distribute the certificate of appreciation. So I would like to invite Professor Dr. Syamsidik to give the certificate of appreciation. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for our moderator, Ms. Rizana Rosemary, and also the speakers, Professor Lisa Iwasaki and Dr. Rina Suryani Oktari, and also Bapak Farhan Muhammad Uzair for our first session. It was a very interesting presentation from all of the speakers. Okay, let's move on to the second session. For the second session, it will be moderated by Mr. Alfi Rahman, PhD. So I would like to invite Mr. Alfi Rahman to the stage. But before that, I would like to introduce him briefly. Okay, so Mr. Alfi Rahman is currently working as a lecturer at the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences of Universitas Syekh Kuala and a researcher at TDMRC, Universitas Syekh Kuala. And he is also currently appointed as editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Disaster Management. He was awarded a doctoral degree from Tohoku University, Japan, 2018 in Human Security and Society Program, Graduate School of International Cultural Studies. His master degree was from Universitas Syah Kuala in 2014 in Disaster Science graduate program, and he did bachelor in communication. Okay, so I will hand over the stage for you, Mr. Alfie Rahman.
Baik. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity for me to be a moderator in the second sessions of this seminar series. And for the second sessions, we will have two speakers that will deliver presentations. For this second session, we more told about how the marine protections, especially from the perspective what already done by Professor Steve Derry, because he also conducted some research related to the coastal areas in the Southeast Asia, especially in Vietnam. And also I would like to read before we invite Professor Steve on the stage and joining with me. I would like to read the short profile of Professor Steve. Steve has been a professor in the Department of Geography at the Laval University since 2003. He wrote La Colonialisms Agricole au Vietnam in 2004. I think this is not in English, so please correct me if I make mistake. And has published more than 20 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters based on his extensive fieldwork in Southeast Asia, mostly in Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand, and probably next in Indonesia, I hope. And then the second speakers is Dr. Nur Fadli, MSc. Dr. Nur Fadli got a bachelor degree in marine science and technology, department at Bogor Agricultural University or IPB University in 2003, and finished his master degree at International Studies in Aquatic Tropical Ecology at the University of Bremen, Germany in 2008. And then in 2019, he finished his PhD program from School of Biological Science, University Science. And also he joined Marine Science Department, Faculty of Marine and Fisheries of Universitas Syah Kuala since 2003. He is currently an associate professor from 2003 until present, and he also a coordinator of genetic and aquatic biodiversity laboratory from 2019 until now at the Faculty of Marine and Fisheries of Universitas Syah Kuala. So I would like to invite two speakers to join with me. Yeah. As we already heard about the importance of local and indigenous knowledge at the first sessions, more told about how the development local and indigenous knowledge and important and affect the society in adapting with the changing of the environment and also disasters and also climate change adaptations way. And for the second sessions, Professor Steve Derry will deliver presentations with the title Marine Protected Areas in Southeast Asia. And Dr. Nur Fadli will deliver a presentation with the title Marine Protected Areas in Aceh, so from South Asia and be more specific in Aceh. So this is also really interesting. And also mentions by Dr. Rizana before that one of very interesting topic that will be discussed for now and until the next, the role of local institution that we call it Panglima Laut in the context of Aceh. So this is one of the local adapting capacity in the context of institutional, how they try to manage the impact of climate change and also the disasters. As we know, we have a limited time because only 45 minutes, as mentioned by the committee for me. So we divided these second sessions into three sections. The first sections will deliver from Professor Steve Derry in 15 minutes. And then next, we will hand the second section to Dr. Nur Fadli, and then we can open questions and answer sessions. And I will remind all the participants, if you have questions, please raise your hand. And also don't forget to say your name to who you address your question. So for the first sections, I would like to hand over this session to Professor Steve Derry for 15 minutes. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Protecting the environment can take several forms: collective, voluntary, forced. Covers an infinity of situations, from protecting the small growth of a flower in your own garden to the protection of Antarctica continent by all the nations of the world. And as such, it has a very long history during the evolution of humankind. In my talk today, I will focus on protected areas in the hand of states, especially the kind of protected areas developed in the world after the delineation of Yellowstone National Park in 1872 in the US. First thing to say, protected areas in general and national parks in particular are not neutral on the land. They are territorial tools. I'm a geographer. I will talk about territory. They are territorial tools at every administrative level. It could be cities, villages, provinces, states. They are using it variously. When a state or an administration delineate a protected area in a particular space, it modifies the way this space becomes a territory, the way it is organized. It modifies how people act in around this specific area. And some extreme instances, the local people, the people who live in the area that is designated as a protected area, sometimes these local people have no more access to the space that is used to be part of their local territories. For example, while tourists, or sometimes mostly international, will have access to this same area because they can pay the price to enter the national park. So creating a protected area could be like cutting the local space and remove it from the local territory to put it in the international territory at another level, national or international. So I have witnessed this situation. I have studied this situation much in mainland Southeast Asia for almost 15 years, mainly in Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand. Second thing, as an introduction, in Southeast Asia, we can see that the development of protected areas has expanded quite rapidly since the 1990s. You can see from these maps that we have drawn in my project that, for example, you can see the situation in 1973 and the situation in 2005. Even if you don't see very specific areas, you can see that there's an expansion of in the number and the area covered by protected areas in space. And most of the protected areas are on above 200 meters of sea level. This is the shaded area above 200 sea level. In the archipelago area in Southeast Asia, the protected areas are more, there are more ancient protected areas. That's a bit different from the mainland Southeast Asia and the archipelago, but I have no historical map for it. this expansion has revealed a different kind of state, actually, the expansion of in the number and the area of protected area, different, the state, a state that is more integrated at the international level between the local, national, and international level. So what I call the integrated state, a state that is different than the modern state, a state that still has national territorial projects like agricultural colonization, but that is also using energy and information coming from the international level in an integrated way to organize all the local areas within their national. So these ideas come from my study of protected areas, evolution in mainland Southeast Asia, mostly in Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand, as I said. And using a short analysis that I made in 2019 of marine protected areas that I did for all of Southeast Asia, I asked the question today to initiate the discussion, to enlarge the discussion. Does this terrestrial way of analyzing state action in matter of protected areas applies also to marine protected areas? What is the role of the state in matters of marine protection? So first thing, when students, I would say that when students in North America or Europe are learning about Southeast Asia, they receive plenty of data or information about the 11 countries in the region, but most information being about the land, how many square kilometers, how much population, what density, the evolution, how much hectares of this crop, or how much hectare of that crop, etc. What is often overlooked is the fact that, save for Laos, actually, which has no access to the sea, and some remote areas in the northernmost part of Burma and Thailand, the sea is never far in Southeast Asia. So as for the land, actually, from a marine point of view, Southeast Asia is a region where the sea is predominant. 2/3 of Southeast Asia's area are actually maritime areas, with Indonesia occupying 55% of it. That is certainly something not forgotten here. Actually, it's even in the first sentence of our national anthem, as I seen at the beginning of this seminar. Ayirku, the first sentence of national, my water. So you don't forget that here. Second, things about marine protected areas in Southeast Asia. This being said, it appears that a bit odd that the trend in creation of marine protected areas in Southeast Asia has been so late compared to land protected areas, given the fact that 2/3 of the area of Southeast Asia is marine. True, it has followed the general trend of the terrestrial counterparts, but with a time lag, actually. And the needs for marine protected areas actually was recognized only at the first IUCN conference in 1962. And one of the reasons maybe for that lag is for the difference in timeline is the fact that if you want to delineate protected areas with a national status in a sea, the countries bordering the sea needs to or even the countries that have boats crossing the seas need to at least agree on maritime rules and on the maritime borders to know what sea could be protected from the country or the other. And in this evolution, Indonesia has been instrumental in the evolution, for example, of the law of the sea, declaring itself an archipelago state in 1957. Then 4 treaties of limited scope were signed in 1958, but we had to wait until 1982 until the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, to be signed and adopted that was adopted only in 1994. So on the land, actually, we had the Treaty of Westphalia back in the 17th century that managed the various problems with the borders of different states. So maybe that's the reason why it was long before we started to marine protected areas. In the end, when you look at the marine protected areas, the first thing that appears actually is that protecting marine areas is, I would say, a land question more than a marine question. Even an urban question, because it's emerging also mostly from the educated middle class, actually. For most of the marine protected areas, in fact, they are attached to some land, some coastal territories. They are managed at the national, either at the national level or through a regional administrative unit, like a province or a district, which basis is always on the land. And even more of that, is often they are attached to a land protected area. In Southeast Asia, if we draw the general portrait of this evolution, like elsewhere in the world, it is following the UNCLOS in 1982, and especially in the 1980s, 1990s, that the number of protected areas has increased significantly. 2009, the portrait, if you have a look here, there was around 230,000 square kilometers of protected areas in marine protected areas in Southeast Asia, more than 700, and 91% of them in the archipelago area. One thing, if we can say that land protected areas are mostly in the mountain areas on the mainland. In the marine protected areas, we can say that most of the protected areas are on the coastline. More than 99% actually of marine protected areas are on the coastline. Like we can see, for example, this is the map of the protected area are in white on this like this big one, but you can see some small here around, like in the coastal area of Sumatra, for example. You can see the all protected areas along the coast. It appears normal if one considers that these areas are less likely to be contested by other countries, and second, that they are often attached to a land, like I said. So in this portrait, actually, protected areas are often poor parents of their land counterparts. If we compare, for example, with land protected areas, Laos and Cambodia have more than 20% of their land areas occupied by protected areas, while most of the countries in the whole of Southeast Asia have more than 10% of their land area protected. While as for marine protected areas, the total average for the region is only 2.5%, and Indonesia has the biggest ratio with 0.1% in 2019, which is far less than the land area protected. So the last point I want to raise here is, what is the role of the state in this in marine areas? So why do we have to protect the seas? There are various justifications, but most of them are related when you read the reports of, for example, national organization involved. Most of the justifications are related to the protection of resources. Reports analyze protected area situations about three main questions. What are the resources? What are the menaces to what are the threats to the resources? What are the solutions? And these organizations are advising states in this way. But what they forgot actually is that, like land protected areas, the first and foremost variable for a state is its territory. And from a state point of view, even marine protected areas are a territorial tool. Modern states have used peasants as a territorial spearhead to occupy and territorialize their land. The new integrated states are sometimes do it, but they are more integrated in a multiscalar network with international, national, regional, at different levels, at example, provincial, local levels are integrated in a more complex network. It's not necessary anymore to plant peasant on the borders. You can, if you have a look at again at this map, for example, this is the map of protected areas in all of Southeast Asia, but land protected areas. And you have a look at the borders between Laos and Vietnam or Cambodia, for example, or even the border between Malaysia and Indonesia, you can see that you have protected areas. You remove the peasants, the people from these borders so it means that you have a different way of managing the relationships between the states than it was before when you were planting peasants. And of course, they didn't remove the militaries from the borders, but you have protected areas. It is a different way of organizing the territory. Second role of states, especially with marine protected areas, is to protect resources. The issue here with a huge difficulty is to manage, and we have seen in the previous presentation, is the competing territorialization projects and strategies, local versus regional. The question by one observer, one participant about deforestation is a question of competing, territorializing projects. They want to, some people want from outside or from inside, they want to use the resources of the one's particular space, but this particular space cannot be used by all the people at the same time. So there's a competition for this space. So local versus regional versus outsiders, for example, for fisheries. And during the last 30 years, a new resource also emerged in marine areas. It's landscapes. Landscapes have become resources for tourism. Minutes? Oh, that's good. So this has an effect on local livelihoods, but also very often there's a reverse. If you increase tourism, you have a reverse effect also. The increase of the number of tourists can generate both consumption of local resources, contamination, and it becomes an increasing weight of garbage and pollution locally. This is what I call the syndrome of the lightest step. The lightest step, if it is repeated, creates an indelible path. You go at the same place, even if you walk slowly. If you go every day for 1,000 years, you will have a step. So it's in tourism, you can see it like this. So for discussion, 3 main points to finish this. The main issue in creating marine protected areas is the competition between territorialization projects. And in this, the big NGOs have also their own agenda. They are competing to create national parks or forest reserve in their own marine protected areas to have the right to be there to manage these areas because it is profitable for them as well. In this arena, the state has the means to arbitrate if he chooses to use it. Means he has the means to arbitrate between the various competing territorialization projects. What I found interesting actually is the case of the Panglima Laut that I didn't know before, but is a case of arbitrating these territorialization conflicts. And what is interesting is that the state is kind of protecting this because locally the Panglima cannot compete. If all the boats from Thailand or Japan or other countries are coming in the area, they cannot compete. They cannot manage this from outside. But with the state protecting this way of managing things locally, that's an interesting way of arbitrating the territorialization. Second thing, it's really, and so Dina talk about it, Sam Siddiq talked about it even yesterday. Second thing related to that is the state can and must think differently than an enterprise. It's not an enterprise. It cannot be neoliberal because the state think also differently than an individual. You can think about territorial management in a different way, larger at the national level to have more. For example, Professor Fouadi Abidi said that it's not only coastal areas that are affected when there is a disaster, and the local people, they cannot integrate this, but the state can say, okay, there's local disaster, yeah, but it affected people, it's affecting people inside also and elsewhere in the country. Larger and geographical level, but also longer in the time. Professor Sam Siddiq talked about the archives that to help planning, and also Uzai, who made this presentation on the archives. It's a way of, passing the knowledge from one generation to the other, and the state has the means to do that. Third, to finish with this, more importantly, it also means that the state has the means to digest and sort the information that can really help manage these specific areas, both in the short and long terms. It can use the combination of various local and scientific knowledge. We have talked about knowledge in previous sessions, and create the best option for both local and national people. As Professor Fouadi also talk about regional zoning, for example. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Steve, for your great presentations, especially how we try to understand about protected areas, especially marine areas, and the geographical point of view. And also, he mentions about some of local practices could be one of the practical example how we try to preserve the marine protected areas as well, what already recognized by Aceh communities for over 500 years ago. Okay, next speakers will deliver by Dr. Nur Fadli. 15 minutes from now, your times.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Pak Alfi. Since it is bilingual, so allow me to use Bahasa. So maybe it's easier for since most of the audience is the students, so I think it's easier for me to speak in Bahasa. But I also put my presentation in English, so I hope Prof. Lisa can also follow my presentation. Okay, selamat pagi Bapak Ibu semua dan adik-adik mahasiswa ya. Saya Nur Fadli, biasa dipanggil Fadli. Saya dari Fakultas Kelautan dan Perikanan ya. Dan kemarin beberapa hari lalu sebenarnya Pak Haikal minta saya untuk mengisi atau bercerita sedikit mengenai kawasan konservasi laut di Aceh. Jadi Marine Protected Area ini kita biasa juga sebut dengan kawasan konservasi laut. Oke, jadi hal yang saya lakukan ketika mempersiapkan presentasi ini adalah sepertinya lebih literature review ya. Jadi saya mencoba melihat beberapa hasil-hasil penelitian ataupun juga proses-proses yang saya ikuti ya selama kita mencoba menyusun kawasan konservasi laut ini di Aceh. Oke, sebagaimana kita ketahui ya, Aceh ini lokasinya di paling barat Indonesia ya. Jadi ini juga salah satu kawasan yang paling memiliki keanekaragaman yang sangat tinggi ya. Karena kita di sini berdiri di 3 kawasan yang berbatasan secara langsung ya, ada Andaman Sea ya, di Indian Ocean dan juga Malaka ya, Selat Malaka. Dan karena ini juga menjadikan kawasan kita ini salah satu yang memiliki keanekaragaman yang sangat tinggi. Kita memiliki 2.817 km dari garis pantai ya. Terus juga 335 pulau ya. Nah, ini tentunya menjadikan Aceh ini salah satu provinsi di Indonesia yang memiliki sumber daya laut yang juga tinggi. Nah, kalau kita lihat ya di Aceh ini kita secara mungkin mudahnya ya, simpelnya itu bisa membagi menjadi 2 kawasan ya. Yang pertama itu kawasan pantai barat selatan ya, ini di mana kalau kita lihat ada 2 ekosistem utama ya di laut tropis yang umumnya ditemukan di kawasan ini. Yang pertama itu adalah terumbu karang ya dan juga lamun ya. Terus kawasan yang satunya lagi ya di pantai timur ya, itu biasa kita sebut juga ya Eastern Coast of Aceh ya. Ini biasanya agak berbeda dengan yang di pantai barat dan selatan. Ini didominasi oleh ekosistem mangrove, ya, hutan bakau atau bak bangka ya kalau istilahnya kita dalam bahasa Aceh. Nah, tentunya ada beberapa alasan ya ketika kita menetapkan sebuah kawasan itu sebagai kawasan konservasi. Tetapi ini saya ingin menyajikan kawasan existing ya, kawasan konservasi yang sudah ditetapkan. Ya, jadi ada beberapa kawasan di Provinsi Aceh ini yang sudah ditetapkan sebagai kawasan konservasi ya. Di sini kalau kita lihat itu totalnya ada hampir 400.000 hektar ya yang tersebar di beberapa kawasan ya, ada di Aceh Barat Daya, di Aceh Besar, Aceh Jaya ya, Aceh Selatan, Aceh Singkil ya, terus juga di Aceh Tamiang, Sabang, Simelu ya. Tetapi memang sebagian besar kawasan konservasi ini umumnya berlokasi di utara dan pantai barat selatan Aceh ya. Sedangkan yang di kawasan timur tadi yang ada mangrove tadi itu baru saya dapat informasinya baru Aceh Tamiang saja. Nah, ini beberapa peta yang saya dapatkan dari SK-SK yang sudah ditetapkan oleh Kementerian Kelautan. Jadi memang ini yang pertama itu sebenarnya yang awalnya itu ada di Sabang ya sejak tahun 1982. Ya, ini ketika masih Menteri Lingkungan Hidup ya yang menetapkan kawasan ini. Itu kalau Bapak Ibu yang sudah pernah ke Sabang, ada di Ibuh itu ada satu yang namanya kawasan Taman Wisata Alam Laut ya, TWAL ya. Terus yang kedua itu Aceh Singkil, Pulau Banyak ya, itu tahun 1996. Sabang juga kemudian juga melakukan penambahan kawasan konservasi. Nanti di tahun 2013 itu ada di kawasan Pantai Timur Sabang, akhirnya juga dideklarasikan sebagai kawasan konservasi. Nah, yang tadi yang lain-lain itu baru saja dapat SK itu di tahun 2020 ya. Jadi memang prosesnya ini sebenarnya panjang sekali. Jadi mulai diinisiasi, terus kita diskusi dengan Dinas Kelautan dan Perikanan tingkat kabupaten, terus nanti kita berdiskusi dengan dengan dinas provinsi ya. Dan nanti yang akan akan mengeluarkan SK penetapan cadangannya itu dikeluarkan oleh gubernur. Nah, nanti dari gubernur baru dikirim lagi ke kementerian, sehingga nanti finalnya itu SK-nya itu berasal dari Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan. Nah, ini beberapa yang kawasan konservasi lain tadi ada di Aceh Barat Daya, Aceh Selatan, Simelu, ya Aceh Besar ya, ini umumnya di tahun 2020. Tapi cerita di belakangnya itu sangat panjang. Nah, ini yang juga saya temukan tadi selain Aceh Tamiang, itu juga saat ini kita juga sedang mengusulkan untuk Aceh Timur ya. Nah, ini kita masih menunggu approval ya dari Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan. Nah, info-info ini sebenarnya bisa didapat secara online di website ini ya, kkp.go.id ya. Ini di sini bisa Bapak akses, di sini informasi terkait berapa luas kawasan konservasi yang ada di Aceh, prosesnya seperti apa ya, statusnya seperti apa, bisa dengan mudah dicari secara online di sini. Nah, tadi saya katakan prosesnya itu sangat panjang ya untuk bisa sampai ke sana. Tetapi biasanya kita mulai ingin ketika kita ingin menentukan kawasan ini sebagai kawasan konservasi, biasanya kita akan lihat dulu apa-apa aja yang ada di kawasan ini. Ya. Nah, di kawasan tropis biasanya seperti kita Indonesia itu ada 3 ekosistem yang sangat penting, yaitu terumbu karang ya, mangrove, dan lamun tadi. Nah, ini kita lihat dulu kondisinya seperti apa. Kita coba melakukan pendataan ya, ini kita lihat dari data tahun 2011 ya, bagaimana kondisi terumbu karang di Aceh. Kita lihat kondisinya ada yang baik, ada yang buruk ya, ada yang sedang. Nah, ini nanti tentunya menjadi dasar kita. Oh, ini kita ingin agar terumbu karang ini bisa lebih baik ya. Nah, ini juga kita support. Dari kampus kita juga support penelitian-penelitian yang bisa kita gunakan untuk membantu penetapan kawasan konservasi ini. Jadi misalnya ini kita di tahun 2012 kita coba lakukan survei biodiversity ya untuk karang. Dan kita menemukan ada sekitar 133 spesies, dan dari 133 spesies ini ada 6 yang kita duga spesies baru ya. Juga ikan juga kita cek ya, berapa banyak ya ikan yang ada di laut Aceh, terutama di kawasan terumbu karangnya ya. Nah, ini rata-rata itu biasanya hampir 300 spesies per lokasi ya, tetapi yang menariknya itu kita ada juga ikan-ikan karang yang endemik ya, artinya yang hanya bisa ditemukan di Aceh saja. Nah, terus kita melakukan proses pendataan ini di setiap lokasi yang ingin kita cadangkan sebagai atau ingin kita tetapkan sebagai kawasan konservasi. Ini hanya beberapa cerita data saja ya. Ini misalnya di tahun 2013 kita melakukan pendataan di Aceh Besar, terus juga di Aceh Barat Daya. Jadi Aceh Selatan juga kita lakukan pendataan ya. Simelu ya. Ini jadi datanya sih data-data ini yang kita gunakan untuk mensupport tadi. Nah, selain tadi kita juga melihat ada beberapa ancaman nih terutama untuk ekosistem terumbu karang kita. Yaitu ada yang coral predator, ada coral disease dan coral bleaching. Nah, ini saya sedikit cerita mengenai ini. Yang coral predator ini juga orang banyak nggak tahu nih sebenarnya ini kita sebut Cantaster planci ini bahasa Indonesianya? Bulu seribu ya. Bulu seribu berduri ya. Ya ini kalau dia sudah kelewat banyak ya, dia akan memangsa karang dengan jumlah yang sangat tinggi ya. Ini sudah dilaporkan sebenarnya di tahun 2013 itu banyak kita temukan di Pulau Banyak ya. Dan dalam 2 tahun terakhir kita menjumpai COT ini di kawasan Ujung Pancu ya. Dalam beberapa penelitian ini mengatakan salah satu penyebab jumlahnya sangat tinggi ya, itu karena terjadi kenaikan suhu permukaan air laut. Jadi memicu dia untuk bertelur lebih banyak. Jadi ini salah satu indikasi kalau terjadi kenaikan permukaan air laut itu ya suhunya, itu kan juga berdampak dengan berkaitan dengan perubahan iklim ya, dengan pemanasan global. Nah ini juga yang menjadi salah satu cerita juga yang buat saya sedih. Waktu itu saya sering baca mengenai coral bleaching hanya dari buku-buku saja. Tetapi di tahun 2010 ini kami juga berkesempatan menyaksikan secara langsung. Jadi kita selama ini cuma dengar dari buku, tetapi ternyata kejadian di Aceh. Ya, kita dapat peringatan ya dari email dari NOAA ya, bahwa ini ada suhu permukaan air laut yang di luar normal ya. Dan ini akan menjadi memicu terjadinya bleaching. Ya. Jadi sebenarnya sudah lama, jadi dampak perubahan iklim di Aceh ini juga bukan baru-baru saja. Ini sejak tahun 2010 kita udah data ya. Laporan pertama itu ditemukan di Aceh Barat Daya di bulan Maret 2010. Ya, jadi semua karang itu mengalami pemutihan massal ya. Nah, tapi yang lebih parahnya lagi itu terjadi di Pulau Weh atau di Sabang ya. Jadi kami coba mendata ya, melakukan penelitian ya untuk mendapatkan data yang real berapa persen sebenarnya karang yang mengalami pemutihan di Sabang di tahun 2010. Nah, ini di tahun 2010 ya, kita cek itu hampir 50% ya, 45,51% karang yang ada di Pulau Wai itu, terutama di perairan dangkalnya itu mengalami pemutihan massal ya. Nah, ini beberapa dokumentasi ya, kita bisa lihat dulu karangnya sangat baik. Ini bisa benar-benar putih ya. Nah, ini ada salah satu karang favorit saya nih dengan salah satu partner saya, Pak almarhum Edi Rudi ya. Namanya Acropora Indonesia. Kami selalu punya foto di tempat ini, jadi kita bisa bandingkan per tahun ya. Jadi ini tahun Oktober 2009 kami pergi, kita foto, 2010 udah putih ya. Oke, nah ini di Juli 2010-nya karangnya udah totali mati ya. Nah, kami pikir hanya terjadi di tahun 2010 saja ya. Tetapi ini terjadi perulangan kembali ya di tahun 2016 ya. Nah, ini di 2016 kita juga mengalami pemutihan massal ya, terutama yang kita data itu di kawasan Aceh Besar. Dan memang dalam literatur yang ada, pemutihan karang ini karena perubahan iklim dia terus terjadi ya, berulang, dan katanya frekuensinya akan semakin lebih sering ya. Nah, terus juga kami juga melakukan penelitian untuk melihat bagaimana dampaknya terhadap hasil tangkapan nelayan ya. Untungnya kami punya data di tahun 2008 hasil tangkapan nelayan yang bisa kami bandingkan dengan data di tahun 2010 ya. Dan itu kita temukan bahwa hampir 50% jenis ikan karang yang ditangkap di Pulau Wah itu berkurang ya. Nah, terus juga lagi faktor-faktor manusia. Tadi faktor alam, ada faktor manusia pakai bom nih dan sebagainya ya. Penggunaan jangkar dan sebagainya. Nah, ini bom juga ini sebenarnya masih sampai dengan saat ini masih terjadi ya, terutama di kawasan Pulau Aceh ya. Karena memang ini cara paling gampang ya untuk dapat ikan ya, karena hanya lempar bom langsung selesai gitu, semua bisa dipungut ikannya. Nah, terus juga tindakan penangkapan ikan yang berlebih. Ini penelitian terbaru kami ya. Kami mengamati ada 4 spesies ikan, ada dua ikan kakap dan 2 ikan kerapu ya. Itu kami menggunakan melihat ada modelnya namanya LB-SPR ya. Itu kita cek gonadnya dan sebagainya, tingkat kematiannya dan sebagainya. Nanti dengan menggunakan software dia akan muncul nih warna-warna ini, ada hijau, kuning, dan merah. Yang perlu diwaspadai adalah yang kuning dan merah itu. Yang merah itu sudah overexploited. Nah, ini yang overexploited ini Epinephelus fasciatus, ini karang merah. Ini gampang sekali kita jumpa kalau di pasar. Sekarang ukurannya dari kecil sampai yang besar tuh udah dijual. Ya, jadi nah ini yang sedang kami coba bantu kawan-kawan di DKP Aceh untuk bisa mencoba mengelola perikanan ini. Terus juga sampah ya. Nah, ini juga ada gambar yang terkenal itu ya Pak, kuda laut dengan cotton bud itu ya. Tapi di Aceh juga sudah banyak nih sampah lautnya bertebaran di mana-mana ya. Nah, terus ini mangrove. Nah, mangrove juga penting tadi saya katakan di kawasan Indonesia Aceh Timur ya. Nah, ini kita punya 30.000 hektar lebih ya untuk mangrove. Terus juga lamun. Nah, lamun ini seperti rumput ya yang ada di dalam laut ya, di dalam air. Ini hanya ditemukan di 2 kawasan saja dia, di Pulau Banyak dan di Pulau Aceh. Ya, dan dari 12 spesies lamun yang ada di Indonesia, kita Aceh punya 6. Artinya setengah keanekaragaman lamun di Indonesia itu kita ada di kita di Aceh. Dan ini kalau tidak kita jaga ya juga tentunya akan hilang. Dan ini merupakan makanan dugong. Jadi kalau kita lihat ada di laut itu ada banyak lamun ini, bisa kita dia sebagai kawasan untuk makan dugong-dugong itu atau putri duyung ya. Kalau ininya orang mengetahuinya putri duyung ya. Terus kita juga punya penyu ya. Ini yang sedang kita juga teliti ya. Kita punya 4 spesies penyu ya dari 7 yang ada di Indonesia. Terus juga kima nih, giant clam ya. Ini juga kita punya 3 dari 7 yang ada di Indonesia. Jadi hampir setengah yang ada di Indonesia itu ada di kita, di Aceh. Nah, ini tadi saya katakan dugong. Ini ada di observasi di ujung Pancu ya. Terus juga manta ya, ini manta ya. Ini juga ditemukan ya di kita di perairan Pulau terutama. Terus juga ada spesies-spesies eksotis lain ya, ada whale shark ya, hiu paus, ada dolphin, Napoleon ya dan sebagainya. Nah, kenapa sebenarnya kawasan konservasi laut ini penting? Karena memang hasil penelitian menunjukkan bahwa di kawasan MPA itu bisa menyebabkan meningkatkan penutupan karang hidup ya. Terus juga ikan-ikan itu juga semakin tinggi. Jadi mudah untuk nelayan kita untuk menangkap ikan ini. Terus juga dalam beberapa penelitian yang dilakukan oleh kawan-kawan di Australia itu juga menunjukkan bahwa zona-zona yang kita lindungi tadi itu bisa memberikan efek spillover ya Pak. Efek yang kita jaga nanti anakannya itu bisa kita tangkap untuk kita manfaatkan. Jadi dalam penelitian mereka ini itu 83% anakan ikan yang ada di luar kawasan konservasi itu berasal dari induk yang ada di kawasan konservasi. Jadi ini untuk menunjukkan bahwa kawasan konservasi itu sangat penting.
2 minutes more.
Oke, baik Pak. Itu juga dilakukan di Papua Nugini ya. Ini terutama untuk ikan-ikan kerapu. Ke depan kita akan coba buat ini juga di Aceh, tapi memang metodenya ini agak sulit, tapi kita coba akan belajar. Karena ini kita pakai menggunakan pendekatan DNA ya. Kita menggunakan DNA. Oke, kawasan konservasi ini tentunya juga ada challenge ya, maksudnya ada tantangan kita di Aceh. Saya yakin juga yang pertama ini nggak semua orang tahu kawasan konservasi di Aceh. Nah, ini perlu sosialisasi. Tadi kan banyak, kalau kita lihat kawasannya banyak sekali ya. Saya yakin nggak semua orang tahu. Jadi mungkin pun juga nelayan juga nggak tahu. Jadi ini perlu bantuan bersama lah untuk kita bisa mensosialisasikan lah keberadaan kawasan konservasi ini. Terus destructive fishing tadi bom ya, bom itu masih sering terjadi. Penggunaan racun ya untuk menangkap ikan itu juga masih terjadi. Nah, sekarang yang juga lagi naik daun ini konversi kawasan pesisir untuk tambak udang. Ini lagi di kawasan pantai barat selatan nih lagi rame nih. Pohon cemara udah mulai ditebang untuk dibuat budidaya udang. Jadi nggak tahu siapa yang akan ngatur ini. Karena memang biasanya kalau ini kan berbenturan dengan bisnis ya. Kalau kita mengatur terlalu jauh karena bisnisnya juga besar, agak sulit ya. Terus juga monitoring ini nggak ada, ya. Penegakan hukum yang rendah, ya. Terus juga fasilitas terbatas, juga koordinasi antara institusi itu juga terbatas, ya. Nah, tadi satu lagi yang climate change ini juga menjadi salah satu faktor yang juga perlu diwaspadai, ya. Sejarahnya tadi saya katakan dari 2010 kita udah pernah sudah berdampak dari perubahan iklim ini. Belum lagi nanti yang natural predator alaminya, ya. Dan juga sekarang sampah-sampah laut juga semakin banyak, ya. Nah, kira-kira itu yang bisa saya sampaikan untuk kesempatan ini, ya. Tentunya ini kerjasama ini kami alhamdulillah untuk konservasi Aceh itu ada forum sendiri, ya, yang terdiri dari NGO, ya, kampus-kampus, ya, institusi kementerian. Dan biasanya kalau ada hal-hal yang ingin kita diskusikan di dalam hal yang ingin kita diskusikan bisa kami lakukan di dalam WhatsApp group itu. Karena memang isinya sebagian besar dari orang-orang yang bergerak di kawasan untuk konservasi Aceh. Demikian, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay. Thank you very much for Dr. Nurfadli for great presentations. And what I can get from his presentations about the importance of role university to encourage community, local and national government and for kawasan konservasi or protect area, especially for marine protected area. And also there's some of challenges and issues so far when we talk about the marine protected area, especially public outreach on marine protected area itself still lack. Yeah, we need some of activities to promote how important our marine areas, and also human activities just like bombings, electrifications, and other activities. So I think I will give the opportunity for the audience, and also I want to invite again some of our audience here or also special guests. For example, here Mr. Haris Bayhaki from the MKJ, Pak Wahyudin from the MKJ, yeah, Ismail and Nur Ahyar from this. If you have questions, please ask now and please raise your hand. Are there any questions for this? Okay. Oh, Pak Agus Salim. Okay, we start from the online participants. Pak Agus Salim. Pak Agus
Okay,
Salim.
thank you very much for this opportunity. Saya rasa ini seminar yang sangat menarik. Tadi Pak Nur Fadli sudah menjelaskan bagaimana perbedaan ekosistem yang ada pantai utara, timur, dan pantai barat selatan. Itu jelas berbeda. Nah, terutama terkait dengan kondisi ekosistem karangnya. Nah, namun dalam keberadaannya tentu ada keterkaitan antara satu ekosistem dengan ekosistem yang lainnya, termasuk ekosistem daratan yang ada di pantai. Ya. Nah, diantaranya kita lihat tadi sudah dijelaskan oleh Ibu Okta, ya, itu ada ekosistem ada ekosistem rawa. Ya. Jadi di pantai barat selatan ini ada rawa singkil, ya, kemudian ada rawa tripa. Nah, kalau kita lihat di rawa singkil itu kondisinya masih boleh dikatakan normal karena sudah ditetapkan sebagai kawasan konservasi dan di depannya itu adalah pulau banyak. Nah, pulau banyak itu banyak keberadaan dari ekosistem terumbu karang. Nah, jadi di sini ada keterkaitan. Nah, saya pernah dengar isu pada saat terjadi banjir singkil, mungkin karena daerah atas itu banyak dilakukan deforestasi, ya, sehingga banjir itu air mengalir ke daerah pesisir sampai ke daerah pulau banyak, dan di situ katanya menimbulkan impact ke ekosistem terumbu karang, terutama terkait dengan marine protected area. Nah, sekarang terkait dengan rawa tripa, tadi Ibu Okta sudah menyinggung, saya rasa saya memberikan appreciate yang sangat besar. Ya, rawa tripa ini saat ini terancam karena statusnya masih APL. Nah, di situ sudah berdiri 5 perusahaan besar kelapa sawit dan cenderung dilakukan deforestasi, ditanam untuk tanaman sawit. Nah, dari proses yang dilakukan di daratan itu juga memicu emisi gas rumah kaca, sehingga bisa menimbulkan dampak perubahan iklim. Nah, ini mungkin dipicu terjadi overdrain, jadi air itu dikeluarkan dari daratan, ya, sehingga kering, dan ini akan memicu pelepasan CO2 lebih banyak karena proses dekomposisi secara aerob. Ya. Nah, permasalahannya air itu dilepas dalam volume yang banyak karena perusahaan itu berusaha mengeringkan, jadi terjadi overdrain. Nah, pada saat overdrain terjadi subsiden. Nah, masalahnya air itu akan masuk ke daerah pantai, sehingga daerah pesisir itu menjadi coklat. Nah, ini perlu diteliti. Bagaimana kondisi karang? Karena kita tahu bahwa pantai barat selatan itu ekosistem karangnya banyak. Karena biasanya sungainya tidak banyak, kemudian perairannya jernih. Ini merupakan habitat bagi terumbu karang. Nah, ini bagaimana akibatnya? Tentu perlu diteliti lebih lanjut. Ya. Nah, jadi ini yang harus dipertimbangkan, ya. Rawa tripa ini sangat penting, harus cepat karena statusnya APL. Nah, kalau tidak itu akan hilang, ya. Nah, kalau seandainya hilang tentu akan berdampak juga terhadap ekosistem yang ada di bawah perairan laut, ya. Tentu yang notabene diistilahkan dengan marine protected area. Terima kasih, Pak.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Agus Salim. I think some of the information is a kind of additional information for our second sessions, but I think that also addressed to Dr. Nur Fadli, and I think that's also related to our first speakers, Professor. But I think this is a kind of we have peatlands in the western part of Aceh. Singkil peatland area and also Rawatripa area, that there are some of the industry activities, human activities that also probably can contribute for some of environmental degradation or something like that. So we need to Pak Agus Salim encourage our academy and our researchers to conduct research in this field. So I think Pak Nur Fadli.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Agus atas pertanyaannya. Ya, saya sepakat Pak dengan yang disampaikan oleh Pak Agus tadi, ya, terutama keterkaitan ekosistem daratan dan lautan ini, ya. Memang dalam beberapa hal, ya, kalau kita amati, ya Pak, terutama yang tadi salah satunya apa ketika banjir Singkil itu, ya, itu memang material sedimentasinya sangat tinggi sekali itu ke Pulau Banyak, Pak, dan memperkeruh air, ya, di perairan yang ada di kawasan ini. Nah, ini sifat hidup dari terumbu karang, ya, atau karang tadi itu dia tidak cocok untuk yang air yang sedimentasinya tinggi, karena dia memerlukan cahaya matahari untuk dia bisa hidup. Nah, ini tentunya akan terganggu, dan memang ketika kita belajar dulu juga memang hal-hal seperti ini harusnya dihindari. Belum lagi sampah, itu sampah dari kota Singkilnya juga terbawa itu Pak ke sana, dan itu kelihatannya juga semakin jauh, ya, ke arah sana. Jadi memang sepakat tadi dengan Pak Agus tadi, misalnya sedimentasi ini kan tinggi berkaitan dengan deforestasi tadi kan, misalnya hutan-hutan yang sudah ditebang itu sudah tidak bisa merangkap lagi sedimen di daratan, sehingga memang perlu istilahnya itu Pak, koneksi, ya, antara laut dan darat ini. Dan yang terkait juga dengan Rawatripa juga saya setuju juga nih Pak, karena memang kami itu baru nggak banyak studinya ke arah sana, tetapi ada beberapa publikasi kami yang terkait di sana, ya, itu terutama untuk keanekaragaman ikannya Pak, ikan air tawar. Nah, ini ya tentunya akan terganggu Pak kalau misalnya habitatnya itu sudah dikonversi ke kebun sawit, ya. Karena ikan-ikan yang biasanya kita jumpai di di cekungan-cekungan yang ada di Rawatripa ini akhirnya habitatnya akan hilang. Nah, jadi ini tentunya perlu penelitian-penelitian yang lebih lanjut. Kita ingin lihat apakah ada saat ini ikan-ikan yang dulu sudah kami teliti jangan-jangan udah nggak ada lagi karena udah rusak habitatnya. Ya, jadi memang saya setuju untuk rawat ripa ini kalau boleh nih Pak Ketua TDMRC nih buat diskusi tersendiri untuk rawat ripa ya, sehingga nanti bisa kita lebih bedah dari berbagai aspek, Pak. Jadi biar apa ya, mungkin buat satu kampanye tersendiri ya, selamatkan rawat ripa gitu. Jadi biar lebih gaungnya apa untuk kita bisa lebih, posisi tawar kita bisa jadi lebih tinggi. Mungkin itu Pak Agus Salim yang bisa saya sampaikan. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Dr. Nur Fadli. Maybe Professor Manjuri, do you have any opinion, especially the relations between land ecosystem and marine ecosystems? Yeah, for example, what happened in banyak islands in terms of the disasters, just like landslide and flood happened in the mainland, and then it's also affected the ecosystem in the sea. Well, so what do you think, based on your experience in the marine protected area, when we see the relations between the land ecosystem and also marine ecosystem? Do you
have much experience in marine protected areas. What was the question?
This is a kind of, not questions, but how we try to connect what actually happened in the land ecosystem that also influence the marine ecosystem.
I have not done research on this in this area. I would not know. But I would have react on the other idea that regarding the link between researchers and local people. I think I have seen in Vietnam, for example, in projects for poverty reduction, that when the local researchers are connected with the local people, there's an exchange in the information, in the knowledge that is beneficial both for the researchers, of course, but also for the local people. The researchers can digest the more knowledge, and the local people are informed. It's like you was talking about the peatlands. So the same was Professor he was talking earlier when she was talking about the climate change going too fast, actually. So when there's this connection between the local researchers and the local people, I think that's the way to find the best options.
Okay, we need to encourage really the stakeholders to talk together, to discuss together, to discuss.
Boleh sedikit Pak, sedikit aja.
Pak Agus Salim, there is any?
Iya, boleh sedikit aja.
Please.
Iya, ya, terutama terkait dengan mangrove. Ya, tadi dikatakan bahwa mangrove itu lebih terkonsentrasi di pantai utara timur. Tapi sebenarnya di pantai barat selatan itu punya potensi, terutama calang. Ya, di situ merupakan ada satu embrio untuk pengembangan marine protected area yang base-nya itu adalah mangrove. Nah, saya rasa ini perlu ditekankan kembali supaya ini bisa dikembangkan. Artinya tidak hanya untuk perikanan, tetapi juga untuk pariwisata. Nah, kita tahu bahwa Singkil itu merupakan kabupaten yang sangat berat terkena pasca tsunami. Dan saya lihat proses recovery-nya itu agak lambat dibandingkan daerah lain. Nah, jadi saya lihat potensi perikanan, terutama budidaya, tangkap, dan juga pariwisata itu kelihatan punya potensi. Nah, jadi ini alangkah baiknya ini ditekankan sehingga ini menjadi mata pencarian yang menjanjikan ke depan, sehingga proses recovery ya pasca tsunami ini bisa lebih cepat dilakukan di Calang, dan kemudian tentu bisa mengamankan bagaimana interkoneksi ekosistem yang terkait untuk melindungi marine protected area. Demikian, Pak.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Agus Salim atas tambahan informasinya. I think that's also really good if we can conduct the next seminar series on the topic. Yeah, and maybe Pak Agus Salim is one of the speakers, potential speakers. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Once more from here. Oh yeah. From on site. Okay, Professor Samshidi.
Yeah, one question probably to both of the speakers, if I may. Is there any model, good model, that's bad model and good model, but I'm interested to know, is there any good model to manage between land or marine protected areas and the life of the community inside that area? Because sometimes when we think about protecting one area in regard to biodiversity or ecological perspective, we try to restrict or limit the activities of the communities inside that area. It happened in many places, including in Singkil or probably even in Tripa area. Is there any good model where everyone probably can learn from that area, specific area, so everyone will be happy with that kind of model? I'm talking a little bit, probably exaggerating to get a perfect model, but if you can give one example, good model so everyone can have an idea what would be the best scenario to manage between the life of the people and the ecological perspective of the area. Thank you.
My experience, I haven't seen very much good models actually of that situation. The main reason actually is not because the people who are creating the national parks or the reserve, it's not because they are not considered for the local people. The main problem is actually the same problem that Professor Iwasaki was saying about climate change. It's because it's going too fast. When we adapt to a situation, when we need to adapt, we need time to adapt to, and to get the knowledge, to get the new skills, to get the training. You know, when you go to, any training takes time to integrate. And when sometimes you create a national parks, and from one day to the other, the local people, they cannot access anymore to what the land they used to get used to. The resources they have, and they say, okay, now you're planting coffee. You will have, you will earn some revenue, but it takes time to become a farmer of planting coffee. It takes time because you need to adapt to how to react to the market, to how to interact with the market. All these stuff is not just, it's learning farming, but it's learning new things. So it's very difficult. So the main challenge is how fast actually, when you create a protected area, these things are creating pressure on the local people. They are losing actually their power. They are marginalized because they are now part of the international market, have their coffee on the international market. This being said, there's a couple of cases that have been studied, for example, in northern Laos, where actually the state didn't have the means to impose the Yellowstonian approach, like it, I have seen it in northern Thailand, for example, where the chief of the national park actually was a big fan of Yellowstone. With the picture, he has been there, and it was, but Yellowstone is a way of thinking of protected areas, like people and nature cannot cohabit together. And in Southeast Asia, you cannot have this when, there are more than 200 people per square kilometers in most of the areas in Southeast Asia, Thailand and Vietnam. So you cannot think like this. You need to think differently the way you need to protect the forest. You need to protect with the local people around. And in northern Laos, the population density is lower, but the state didn't have the means to really move the villages of the people. So some villages stayed in the protected areas, and they actually were allowed to kind of stay there with limited agriculture around, and they were learning some tourism skills to welcome with limited access. Actually, there was a limited number of tourists who were able to access the park. So for me, it was not a model to try to redo elsewhere, but it was because of the time frame, because it was longer. in the long term, actually, it will allow these local people to more adapt to these new situations from other areas where the national parks have been created, and from one day to the other. The long answer, but I think that it's a big challenge.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Samsidik. Kalau kami melihat Pak, protecting ini artinya nggak mesti juga semua kita larang gitu Pak ya. Memang yang marine protected area-nya kan kita juga bagi ke beberapa zona, dia ada zona inti yang memang totally no take zone, kita nggak boleh lakukan apa-apa. Tapi juga ada zona pemanfaatan, ada juga zona-zona lain yang bisa kita manfaatkan. Jadi tidak totally kita larang untuk melakukan kegiatan. Yang kita lakukan adalah mengelola agar tadi misalnya kan kalau yang saya katakan yang no take zone itu biasanya kita lindungi kawasan-kawasan yang pertama biodiversitasnya tinggi, terus juga biasanya itu spawning area untuk beberapa spesies ikan atau apa yang memang kalau kita biarkan itu rusak, nanti ikan-ikan itu tidak bisa memijah gitu atau bertelur atau bereproduksi. Nah, ini yang biasanya kita petakan dulu ketika kita akan menentukan kawasan inti ini. Nah, yang terkait tadi dengan pengelolaan ini juga yang tadi studi kami yang terakhir tadi, itu kan tadi ikan Epenipelus fasciatus itu kan udah merah tadi, ya. Nggak mungkin juga kita larang semuanya nggak boleh nangkap gitu ya. Tapi yang kita larang adalah jangan ditangkap ikan-ikan yang kecil. Boleh ditangkap. Makanya kita perlu penelitian. Akhirnya kami tahu tuh ikan Epenipelus fasciatus itu dia memijah pertama sekali itu di ukuran 20 cm. Nah, jadi ketika kita ingin mengelola ikan ini, kita sarankan ke nelayan, tolong jangan tangkap ikan yang di bawah 20 cm. Biar dia diberi kesempatan untuk memijah dulu sekali minimal. Sehingga dia ada generasi selanjutnya. Caranya gimana? Mata pancingnya. Jangan gunakan mata pancing yang kecil. Gunakan mata pancing yang besar agar ikan-ikan yang kecil itu tidak tertangkap. Nah, ini kita adakan penelitian-penelitian seperti itu dan juga kita lihat respon nelayannya. Dan sebenarnya nelayan-nelayan yang ini kebetulan penelitiannya di Aceh besar ya, kita lakukan di Pulau Aceh. Kita ada pendekatan yang namanya choice modeling, itu baru kita gunakan. Itu memang mereka sebenarnya nelayan kita tuh memilih keadaan yang lebih baik. Mereka mau berubah untuk tidak menangkap yang kecil, tapi kita perlu bantu alternatif yang lain tadi. Misalnya tadi mungkin mata pancingnya yang lebih besar kita bisa permudah misalnya dan sebagainya. Nah, tadi untuk model yang mana yang tepat nih agak susah Pak, karena masing-masing lokasi punya ciri khas tersendiri ya kan. Untuk mangrove itu setahu saya ada salah satu yang bagus misalnya di Malaysia. Mereka punya sistem tebang pilih tebang beraturan ya, misalnya ini ditebang dulu, nanti dibiarin tumbuh, tebang lain, jadi bergiliran. Akhirnya mangrove-nya itu bisa terus ada untuk industri arang yang bisa mereka gunakan untuk dijual, dan itu betul-betul dikelola dengan sangat baik. Untuk ikan karang itu yang paling bagus itu di Australia. Mereka memang betul-betul ketat sekali. Tapi apakah kita bisa bawa ke Indonesia? Saya nggak yakin juga, karena untuk bisa ketat seperti itu tadi perlu infrastruktur yang cukup ya, perlu monitoring yang rutin ya kan. Sekarang kita tadi kawasan konservasi kita nih banyak Pak. Itu sekarang sudah semua diserahkan ke provinsi kalau nggak salah saya. Nah, itu siapa nih yang mengawasi? Itu juga nggak ada orangnya. Sumber dayanya nggak ada, terbatas dananya dan sebagainya. Jadi kita menetapkan tapi kita juga nggak sanggup mengelola. Nah, ini yang tentunya harus jadi bahan PR juga lah buat kita di Aceh. Mungkin itu yang bisa saya respon terkait dengan pertanyaan Pak Syamsidik. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Dr. Fadli. I think every area has a specific model and approach make sure this protected area ecosystem for the future. I want to highlight from Professor Steve, a time constraint is also one of things that should be noted if we want to implement the best model in every place. So I think this is the end of our second sessions, and I would like to say again, thank you very much for our both speakers for their knowledge that's sharing with us for today. And also thank you very much for all the audience already participating with us, already participated with us for today, and we will see you again in the next seminar series. And I will hand over. Again, we give big applause for our speakers. And I want to close this by hand over these sessions to MCs. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, please remain on the stage because we would like to give the certificate of appreciation. Again, Professor Dr. Syamsidik. Thank you very much for our second moderator, Mr. Alfi Rahman, and also the speakers, Professor Dery Steve, and also Dr. Nur Fadli, for the interesting topic and discussion. And before we close, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Syamsidik to give a brief summary of the event today and the closing remarks.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I promise to do this short. Again, thank you very much to everyone, to all the speakers and fabulous moderators and the guests that been attending this forum since morning. I believe friends and guests from outside of Banda Aceh have to travel very early in the morning. From Aceh Besar and probably from Sabang, they travel a long way to reach this place. Thank you again. Also to Committee Pa Haikal and friends and guys over there. Thank you a lot. And also to our beautiful MCs. Thank you a lot for organizing this very interesting event. And I look forward to also welcome you again in the next seminar series. Like I said in the morning, that we will do this regularly. And in the next seminar series will be about 2 weeks from now. We will inform you once we have detail about that. And again, thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you very much to Professor Dr. Syamsidik. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so this is the end of our event today, the 25th seminar series of TDMRC on the theme of environmental management and adaptation strategies to climate change from the perspective of local knowledge on disaster and regional zoning. So I am Dwi Juniana as your master ceremony today. Would like to say thank you for all participants and apologize for any mistake. Wabillahi taufiq walhidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.